At UFC 178 in September 2014, Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier met in a key matchup of young, rising featherweight contenders. The then 26-year-old Irishman knocked Poirier silly in under 2 minutes. It was the biggest win of McGregor's career to that point and a major acceleration point for his rise to superstardom. A little over a year later, he would be UFC featherweight champion. By the time of their rematch on January 23rd of this year, both men's careers had progressed tremendously. McGregor, of course, had become the UFC's first ever simultaneous two-division champion, even if he never ended up defending either belt. Along the way, his visibility had only continued to rise, as he had become perhaps the biggest star in the sport's history and a millionaire many, many times over. Poirier's track had been more muted, but nearly as impressive, as the Louisianan had moved up to lightweight and punched his way to an interim title and a shot at Khabib Nurmagomedov. The rematch was a different affair to the first fight. The contrast between McGregor's superstar lifestyle and dalliances with boxing compared to Poirier's laser-like focus on his MMA career seemed to tell, as McGregor was beaten to the punch, seemed unable to deal with Poirier's use of the kind of low kicks that have become an increasingly common weapon in the last 2 or 3 years, and was knocked out in the second round. It was the first such loss of McGregor's career. Now, 6 months later, comes the rubber match. Like most trilogies between championship-level fighters, it has enormous implications for the division in which they compete today, but will also be a career-defining moment for both men. The stakes couldn't feel much higher if there were a belt on the line. Good evening, and welcome to the Sherdog Radio Preview for UFC 264, Poirier vs. McGregor 3. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen. Keith is the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, as well as the Sherdog Radio Network, where he is the creator and host of several shows, including MMA Legacy and, of course, the Schillen and Duffy Show. Keith, how are you this evening?
I'm excellent, brother, man. It's a big week, UFC 264. Incredible main event. I think the undercard is absolutely loaded. I'm excited to talk about fights. We got a lot of. I'm sure we're gonna talk a lot before we even get to the fights. I'm really excited, man.
It does feel like a big one, and on my non-Sherdog podcast earlier this week, it was pointed out to me that nobody is going head-to-head with this card. Nobody's even piggybacking off this card. Like, there's no Bellator, no One Championship, no KSW, no PFL. I mean, they're not even like there's nothing. This is about as empty a week of high-level MMA as you will ever find. Like, normally, sometimes there'll be a big UFC card and Bellator will sneak one in on Friday before it, something like that. Just trying to play
Sure.
into it a little bit. There's nothing like that this week.
Yeah.
This, to me, I'm sorry, it feels to me this is about as big a UFC card feel as I can remember of a card without a title fight on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is probably the biggest fight since McGregor Diaz, talking non-title fight that I can remember. Yeah, I understand why any organization wouldn't want to go on the same weekend as McGregor and Poirier, because you know what's going to happen. Say you were Bellator. Say you wanted to put the AJ McKee Pitbull. That's probably the biggest fight they have going. Maybe the biggest fight in Bellator history. I knew we were talking about Bellator, but let's do it anyways.
Yeah.
You're going to get overshadowed. ESPN is going to be talking about. I mean, the weigh-ins on the Friday night would be, ceremonial weigh-ins would be bigger than the show for Bellator, and also, yeah, me and you will spend the entire weekend watching fights, and probably people who are watching this show would spend the entire weekend watching fights. But my friend Mike and my friend Josh aren't gonna. They're gonna watch one. They're not gonna give up Friday night and Saturday night.
Yeah.
And you have friends like that and whatnot.
Oh.
So you get overshadowed. People aren't gonna watch. If they do, you're asking Pitbull about Conor McGregor. You're asking about Dustin Poirier. So. Yeah, I wouldn't go against it if I was Bellator. I would try to have my thing be the biggest thing of a weekend, going against a fight night. Like, at the end of the month, I think they actually will be the biggest thing of the weekend. That's what I would do.
Yeah, believe me, I wasn't complaining. I'm kind of happy that all I need to focus on this week really is this card. So yeah, not complaining, just observing. But having said that, I gave a little setup of the huge trilogy fight at the top of the card, but we've got 12 others to go before we get to that one. Shall we kick right into the prelims here? First up on the UFC 264 prelims is a middleweight matchup between Alen Amedovski and Yaozong. Amedovski, the 33-year-old Macedonian by way of Italy, is 8-2 overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC back in early 2019. He fought most recently in September of 2019, getting knocked out by John Phillips in like 15 seconds at UFC Fight Night, Hermansson versus Cannonier. He has been inactive since, but he is back, and he is back taking on a guy who hasn't fought in even longer. Yaozong, 26-year-old Chinese fighter that has fought at light heavyweight as well as middleweight, is 3-2 overall. He is 0-2 in the UFC. He fought once in November of 2017, once in November of 2018. That would be his most recent appearance, where he lost a unanimous decision to Rashad Coulter at UFC Fight Night, Blades versus Ngannou 2. He has been inactive since as well. I do not envy the people that have to put odds on a fight between two guys that haven't fought in 2 years, but it is Amedovski, the slight favorite. He's out there at -135. You can get who at +110 or +115. I'm going to kick this one to you pretty quickly, because if you can't tell, I don't know what to say about this fight, except that even at the time, I couldn't understand why Yaozong was in the UFC. I take that back. I understand why he was in the UFC, because even by 2017, the UFC wanted to make inroads into China. They were mining, WLF and Da Chang Wuyi and just all these promotions for anybody who strung together a couple of wins and showed any kind of spark. But even by that standard, I just in his 2 UFC fights, Cyril Asker and Rashad Coulter, I don't see anything he does at a UFC level in particular. Amedovski is a guy I actually was kind of high on coming into the UFC. I saw his last couple fights in Bellator. I thought he was a good addition to the roster. And, not to have spoilers right before we talk about Zhumagulov versus Rivera, but this is 2 guys that are winless in the UFC, but one of them feels to me like he belongs there and the other doesn't. Just based on that and nothing else, give me Amedovski, and I'm going to say he does knock him out, say, in the second round.
Yeah, so I think the bigger mystery is not how are these guys in the UFC, but how are these guys opening up a Conor McGregor card? I mean, you think about all the fighters on the roster that would be dying to get on a card. I mean, there's guys who main evented UFCs in the past that would gladly step in and be the curtain jerker. And we get 2 guys that have been out for 2. Maybe they were holding out for 2 years, saying we won't get on a card unless Conor's fighting. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's why they had the long layoff. I don't know. Amedovski, his style, he presses forward. He's very aggressive, pretty fast hands, though he tends to wind up and get very wild. He also drops his hands, which is a major issue defensively. He's an extremely weak wrestler. He really struggles to get up from the bottom. Krzysztof Jotko took him down over and over and over in their debut. Now, Jotko's a very tough fight in your UFC debut. I mean, that's, I don't know if he was ranked at the time, but he's a guy who's always borderline being ranked, both in UFC rankings and in the Sherdog rankings. One thing, he did have a moment against Jotko, though, very, very briefly. In a scramble, somehow he found himself on top, and he landed really hard ground and pound, and then he got up for no reason at all, and let him back up. I don't know why. And I'm obviously worried about his chin after his last fight. He was knocked out cold. Now move over to who? There is some things I like about this guy. He's got high output. He throws combos. He can be very wild, similar to Amedovski, which is probably why the UFC put this fight. Well, I might be giving them too much credit, but they might be putting this fight on the card thinking this is going to be wild. Haymakers getting thrown, someone's getting knocked out. That very well could be the case. He also loads up on everything, But one thing I do like for a young fighter is that he targets the body. And it's probably his best strike. He kept dipping against Rashad Coulter with a left hook. A lot of kicks. He did target calf kicks, threw a couple spinning attacks, but he's got some huge. So offensively, I don't mind a lot of his skills offensively, but defensively, this guy has major holes. He's very hittable. He drops his hands. He has no head movement at all. He was dropped against Rashad Coulter. Now, some people think he should have beat Rashad Coulter. Some people thought he won the decision. I'm okay with Coulter winning the decision. To me, it was a very, very close fight. But he in the clinch, he can get in the clinch. He's a big guy. Obviously, one time he fought at heavyweight. Now he's all the way down to middleweight, so he should have a height advantage. He does. They say he has a wrestling background, though I haven't seen much of that wrestling background. So as far as prediction goes, Hugh lost to some bad fighters, Cyril Asker and Rashad Coulter, as you mentioned. Amedovski lost to John Phillips in 16 seconds.
I think Phillips literally lost 4 straight fights after that.
Yeah,
like
he became a punchline for us on the recap shows. I see way more skills in Amedovski than I see in Hugh. However, I think the younger fighter has the higher ceiling. He has a wrestling background and can get some takedowns if that's the case. I do hate the reports that he won't have a corner there, that supposedly there might be some visa issues. That's not good for a young fighter, especially someone who only has 5 professional fights.
And none in almost 3 years.
None in almost 3 years. But I do like that he traveled and even training with Tiger Muay Thai. I think it's one of the best places to go to, improve your striking. And also, I have this one rule, is I can't pick anybody who lost to John Phillips in a fight. So last card, I picked 9 upsets. I'm going to start off right away. Let's do it. I'm kicking Hugh by decision, and I'm throwing my upset special right out the gate. This is the big card. Let's go, man.
All righty. Keith Schillen, hot right out of the gate at UFC 264. Stay tuned, folks. Next up, it is the flyweights as Zhalgas Zhumagulov and Jerome Rivera square off in a matchup of men also looking for their first UFC win. Zhumagulov, the 32-year-old from Kazakhstan, is 13-5 overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC early last year. He fought most recently in January, actually at the last Poirier versus McGregor card, dropping a competitive unanimous decision to Amir Albazi. He will take on Rivera. The 26-year-old product of New Mexico is 10-5 overall. He is 0-3 in the UFC. He is actually matched one of the records nobody ever wants to match, in that he has lost fights in 3 different weight classes in his first 3 UFC fights. Most recently, he got knocked out in under 30 seconds by Ode Osborne at UFC Fight Night Overeem versus Volkov back in February. Despite the fact that these men are a collective 0-5 in the UFC, the oddsmakers are strongly on the side of the former Fight Night's global champ, as Zhumagulov is minus 315 right now, where you can get Rivera around plus 250 or plus 260. I wrote about Zhumagulov in my column for Sherdog this week as just one of the fighters on the card who is under a little more pressure than the straight wins and losses would seem to imply. The reason I say that is Rivera's 26 and Zhumagulov is 32. Zhumagulov came to the UFC, and I don't think I was alone in this. I was like, that guy's for real. I think he's a potential top 15, top 10 flyweight, like sooner rather than later. Because he had beaten like 3 straight UFC level guys. He beat Ali Bagatinov. He beat Tyson Nam, who's back in the UFC. I was like, Zhumagulov is going to come into the UFC. He's going to win his first 2 fights, and he's going to be like almost in the title picture already. That has not happened, but he still looks like a guy who could and should be a top 10 flyweight to me. It hasn't broken his way. I thought he actually should have beaten Haliim Paiva in his UFC debut. And then against Amir Albazi, I thought he righteously did lose that fight, and it was kind of alarming that he gassed out so badly. But he was still very competitive. So he's been in the UFC, and he's been competitive against really solid guys, whereas Rivera has just come in and really been outclassed in 3 different weight divisions. But if Rivera loses, and he's certainly going to be on our cut list if he does, and probably on the UFC's as well, Well, you know what? He's a 26-year-old guy who just proved not to be UFC ready yet, and for all we know, he could be back in a few years. For Zhumagulov, that's not the case. I mean, if he washes out on Saturday, I bet we never see him fight in the States again. I bet he goes back over to Fight Nights Global or ACB or something and just licks his wounds for the rest of his career. So he's under a lot of pressure, and obviously I'm not as high on him as I was a year ago since he lost 2 fights in a row, but he really is kind of small and stumpy even for flyweight. I think that's a concerning thing. Like, he's just a short, stocky dude. He's like, like you could put him inside Artem Lobov as like one of those little Russian nesting dolls. And against Rivera, that's really going to stand out because Rivera is like especially at flyweight, he's built like a praying mantis. Like, he's so long. And that's been a problem as well in that he's just not very physically strong at any of these weights. And, at 26, he's probably not at the peak of his muscular development. This is Zhumagulov's fight to win. He's a grinder anyway. He's a grinder and a builder. I think that's why he was as successful in Fight Nights Global as he was, is because he was in 5-round fights for the last little stretch there. I still think he can beat Rivera. Like, Rivera's not going to be able to keep him on the outside. He's going to fight a very Zhumagulov-y fight where it'll take some work to get inside and get into his preferred striking range. He's probably going to turn to his wrestling. I think he's smart enough to know that his job is on the line too. He's a much better wrestler than Rivera, even if he's not like the kind of lights out wrestler you expect of a guy with a name like this. From the area of the world that he is, he's definitely a better wrestler than Rivera. So give me Zhumagulov to hang on to his roster spot and maybe the ghost of his hype by a pretty straightforward unanimous decision.
Yeah, it's another head scratcher being on the card. Now, I love flyweight, so I'm not complaining, and I think it's going to be a fun fight. But when you have the records like this, it's also surprising that he got on this card. There's going to be a huge discrepancy in height, as you mentioned, as I think it was small and stumpy versus Jerome Rivera, who's 5'10" flyweight.
Yep.
I'm going to start with Rivera, even though my notes have Zhumagulov first. I will always give Rivera credit for moving up 2 weight classes in the UFC. This was not a regional show when he did that, taking on O'Day Osborne. I give credit for that. He's a southpaw. As mentioned, obviously he stands out because how tall he is. He's a limited boxer. And that's because he doesn't really know how to use his length. He tends to dive into his punches. He leads with his chin. He's very hittable. He was obviously knocked out quick in his last fight. But as you mentioned that you said Zhumagulov is a builder, Rivera's a little bit of a builder himself. And he has a good cardio to kind of get stronger as the fight goes on. When he does try to keep distance, he uses it with his feet. He doesn't use it with his hands. A lot of kicks, teep kicks. I actually think inside which is weird for someone to be as big as him, is his best thing. Getting in the plum clinch where he uses knees. He really uses framing to create the space he needs to get his knees up, land hard shots. I would say he's an okay wrestler. He shouldn't have the wrestling advantage in this fight, but he's an okay wrestler. On the ground, though, he's pretty good. Solid top control. Look his to advanced position. Has 7 submission wins on his record. He's a weak defensive wrestler, though, and he makes a mistake. He has overconfidence around. He has given up his back to get up to his feet. But he has good cardio, and that's part of the building. Now move over to Zhumagulov. Southpaw, I would say he's a pressure. Well, he's weird because his last fight, he didn't throw much, and I think that was because you talked about he gassed out, which is surprising because that's usually not his game. He's usually a presser fighter who gets nonstop action, has the cardio to go. I mean, you've seen it on outside of the UFC. He was able to go 25 minutes hard. So I'm gonna assume that last fight was just an outlier. Maybe it was a weight cutting issue. Maybe it was something. Maybe it was his small stumpy legs tired him down, was to move around, but. Well, he's really fun to watch. He throws hard, wild strikes. He tends to throw them from his hips, so he loses power because of his lack of technique. But it's fun to watch. He loves his lead right hook, which is his best strike. You mentioned his wrestling. He's more of a grinding wrestler, than an explosive. He's not a Kevin Randleman drive through your hips. He's more of a John Fitch, put you against defense, grind on you, hang on you, lean on you, then he kind of trip you down. Good trips from inside. He does need to improve his takedown defense. Ali Bagatinov took him down in their title fight. Easily. That's like, and by the way, I know I say this every single time we talk about Zhumagulov. I don't know how he got the win over Bagatino in that fight. I thought Bagatino clearly won that fight. So as far as the prediction goes, I think the line should be much closer than it is. I think Rivera actually is better than he's looked so far in the UFC. He has some major holes, especially being that he's so hittable, but he has some brilliant. Like I see moments of brilliance in him, particularly in the clinch and some of his offensive grappling. Like it wouldn't shock me if he caught a submission with his long arms, maybe like a Darce choke or even a triangle choke. That said, I think Zhumagulov lands the better punches. I think he forces Rivera back on his back foot for most of the fight and kind of just lands the better shots, mixes in a couple of his own takedowns, and I say he wins the decision. So we didn't disagree on this one. We're finally on the same page.
There you go. Two of us calling for Zhalgas Zhumagulov to get the job done against Jerome Rivera. It's back up to the 185-pounders as Omari Akhmedov takes on Brad Tavares on the undercard of UFC 264. Akhmedov, the 33-year-old Dagestani, is 21-5-1 overall. He's 9-4-1 in the UFC. He fought most recently in January, choking out Tom Breese with an arm triangle in the second round at UFC on ESPN, Chiesa versus Magny. Prior to that, he had lost a decision to Chris Weidman last August, which snapped a 6-fight unbeaten streak for him. He'll be taking on Brad Tavares. Tavares, the 33-year-old Hawaiian, is 18-6 overall. He's 13-6 since joining the UFC out of season 11 of The Ultimate Fighter. He fought most recently at UFC 257, again, Poirier versus McGregor 2, where he took a unanimous decision over Antonio Carlos Jr., a.k.a. Shoeface. That snapped a 2-fight losing streak for him against Israel Adesanya and Edmund Shabazian. Odds on this one are fairly close. Tavares is out there at minus 160 or so. You can get Akhmedov at plus 140 as the slight underdog. Keith, who do you like in this one and how?
Well, this is one of those funny fights when it comes down to the placement on a card. When you have, two guys that are right there at the border, like they're right there for the UFC rankings, right there for the Sherdog rankings. It's an intriguing stylistic matchup. I'll start with Tavares. He's well-rounded. That's the thing that always jumps out to me with Tavares. That's what I said last time we broke him down. I would say he's good at everything, but not great at anything. But I don't mean that as a diss. Because a lot of times some guys are great at something, they're a specialist. That's not him. Good head movement, uses feints well, very fluid on his feet, really steps in on his shots to generate pretty good power. He can be dragged into a brawl at times, which he shouldn't do because he's a pretty technically sound striker, though. He can just pick apart from range and win, use movement. Good calf kicks, good body kicks. He can be backed up straight against the fence. I was surprised that he backed up a lot against the fence against Antonio Carlos Jr. for a guy who wants to get the fight to the ground. I don't think he showed intelligence there, but he had the athleticism to fight off the takedowns. He's got and that's because he has really good takedown defense. He showed great balance at times. Carlos Jr. had his leg like all the way up in the air, bouncing on one foot. He still didn't get taken down, or if he did, he bounced right back up. And he'll mix in some takedowns himself. Now move over to Akhmedov. Akhmedov, I think he's a better striker than he gets credited for. He's got a busy jab. He's not very fast, but I think he's okay striking in the pocket. He throws to kind of wing power shots, which is a problem, but it's kind of such unorthodox that it lands. It kind of reminds me a lot of like Alexei Oleinik. Like you don't think of the guy as a striking, but then all of a sudden he's landing shots because you don't think of it. He will target the body, which I like. I would say he has stinging power. Like he's not a big cracker, but he's got some, stinging power. But he's a brute in close. If he can get you against the cage, solid dirty boxing, good offensive wrestling. He got takedowns against Chris Weidman. He got takedowns against Ian Heinisch. He showed insane strength in the Ian Heinisch fight where he picked up and slammed Ian Heinisch. Ian Heinisch is a very good wrestler. Solid takedown defense too. Though if you can get him on his back, he does have like wrestlers issues where he really struggles when he's on the bottom. Like he struggled to get up against Chris Weidman. And the other thing, and I know you're going to love talking about this because I know you love breaking down Akhmedov. and it's probably the first thing you're going to say, cardio is a major issue. And it's because he comes out like a bat out of hell and he wrestles a lot. So if you throw power shots when you're on the feet and then wrestle, you tend to drain the battery very quickly. This is a really fun fight. Tavares is going to have to weather an early storm from Akhmedov. Like, it's going to happen. Akhmedov's going to come out throwing hard shots. I expect Akhmedov to get a takedown, maybe 2 takedowns on Tavares. But Tavares is going to make him work. Like, he's going to bounce back up. He's going to fight. He's going to be pushing the head. He's not going to settle when he's taken down. And I think that tires Akhmedov down, maybe even more than usual. And because of that, I think Tavares will start, pulling away, especially midway through late second round. I think he wins at least the last 2 rounds. And give me Tavares by decision.
Yeah, you laid out a lot of what I wanted to say there. I will say this. I mean, if you had told me 11 years ago now that Brad Tavares is going to be the most accomplished guy to come out of season 11 of The Ultimate Fighter, I certainly would have asked either for some of whatever you were on or the keys to your time machine. But
Ben, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, of course.
Can you name some guys from that season? Just like who you would have thought would have been better?
That's the Court McGee's the only other even decent guy from that season. Like, really? That's it. And as much as I love Court McGee, like Utah guy, he's under 500 in the UFC right now. Like,
Brad Tavares is better than him. Yeah.
Oh, Brad Tavares has been, you said it, he's been kind of skating the bottom of the top 15 for most of his 11-year UFC career. It's a great success story, and he is a gatekeeper in the truest sense of the word. Like, I hate the term just because it sounds demeaning, but he literally is that guy. Like, he has basically no bad losses. He'll jump up and beat a good guy every once in a while to just kind of remind you how dangerous he is. He beat guys like Lorenz Larkin, Nate Marquardt, Elias Theodorou, guys that were in that same kind of 11 through 20 range at the time he beat him. Like, it's been a great career for him. And he's kind of done it by being the opposite of every Hawaiian fighter stereotype you can think of. Just a smooth, steady, good, generally solid, fight IQ, the opposite of a wild, like, brawler. It's great. Even if his fight with Elias Theodorou was one of the worst fights I ever saw in my life. Anyway, yeah, Akhmedov, cardio problems, and it's a shame because he's good, and if he had the cardio to be able to really make that approach work, he'd be great, and he would be a blast to watch. As it is, he still is a blast to watch. He just doesn't win quite enough to get into the title picture. But I'm with you here. I mean, he'll come out like a bat out of hell. Problem is, like, Tavares just, unless you're Robert Whittaker, or Edmund Shabazian, you're not going to blitz him. And while Akhmedov is aggressive, it's not like the Robert Whittaker, Edmund Shabazian, I'm going to snipe you with my fast twitch, like, striking. So yeah, Tavares will at least survive the first round, and he will be the much fresher guy as it goes along. I agree with you. Tavares by decision here, going away. Not going to call for a finish, but he might lose the first round. He should win the second and third. That brings us down to the flyweight division once again, but this time it is the women, as it is Jennifer Maia taking on Jessica Ai. Maia, the 32-year-old Brazilian, is 18-7-1 overall. She is 3-3 since joining the UFC as a sitting Invicta FC champion. She fought most recently last November at UFC 255. That was, of course, her title shot against Valentina Shevchenko, where she did make it to the final bell. She did win a round, and in the eyes of most observers, seemed to put on a pretty admirable performance, considering she was taking on one of the most dominant fighters in the sport. She'll be taking on Ai. The Ohio native is 15-9 with 1 no contest. She is 5-8 in the UFC. She's currently on a 2-fight losing streak. She fought most recently at UFC 257, where she lost a unanimous decision to Joanne Calderwood. Previous to that, she lost a unanimous decision to Cynthia Calvillo in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 10 last June. Maia is the moderate favorite here, minus 175 or so. You can get Ai at plus 150 or plus 155. Keith, I feel as though often when we're doing these previews, we'll talk about placement on a card, like, why are these two unranked schlub heavyweights on the main card, while there's 2 top 10 women like buried on the undercard. This is one time where I will not question that. We have 2 women that they're definitely both in the UFC top 10. They're both at least in the Sherdog probably top 15. But I understand why this one is buried. And for me, there are 2 reasons. One, both of them have already lost to Valentina Shevchenko. So they're going to be at the back of the line for a title shot. So this has fewer implications for the title picture than most contender fights in that division. And second, this fight has every possibility of being absolutely dreadful to watch. Just the way these women's fight styles clash. I expect that we're going to get a super clinchy battle. This is the kind of fight where I expect that maybe 90% of it is going to take place with at least one of them touching the fence. Maia likes to punch her way into range, get to the clinch, and maybe work for her takedowns from there. Like obviously, she is a grappler by training and preference, even though she's fairly well rounded at this point. And I think she's going to try, punch her way into the clinch against Jessica Ai, only to realize that Jessica Ai is very happy and comfortable in the clinch and probably physically stronger than she is. And I think it's going to be like not even Superman and Kryptonite. It's just going to be like 2 pieces of Kryptonite thrown into the cage and just kind of sitting there against the fence. However, I do think optically, this is going to look like a win for Maia. She's going to look like the aggressor. She'll probably be the one pushing Ai around as she tries to get into range, and I would prefer to stay, out a little bit more. So this could be like a crummy split decision type fight, but give me Maia, by decision 2 rounds to 1.
Yeah, I get that. You said that this. So let me back up. You said that you have 2 ranked females fighting this far down the card. For once, I actually agree with. I mean, I shouldn't say for once I agree. I agree that this should be not buried because, like you mentioned, both these girls showed that they are so low compared to the champion, not even close. That it's they could get back to title fight with no one giving them a shot, which is funny considering you were just talking about how Maia did well against Valentina Shevchenko. She might have won the first round. like we feel so good about it that she got dominated the last 4 rounds. And I agree with you. Like at this point in Valentina Shevchenko's career, winning a round and maybe winning a round does make you look good. It reminds me of when Tim Elliott won a round against Demetrius Johnson, and then got smoked for the next 20 minutes. But everyone always remembers like how well Tim Elliott did against Demetrius Johnson. Like he didn't win another minute of the rest of the fight. And then you said that this fight's going to be ugly. Isn't that like all Jessica Ai fights? Like they're just kind of boring and Jessica Ai-ish. And that's because Jessica Ai, she's not a great athlete. She's flat-footed. She's kind of slow. She makes up for it by having good output, but like nothing. It's not like crushing power. It's not high combinations. It's more just like throwing in that space and kind of forcing your opponent to block a lot. Her fight against, but she's looked really bad lately. I think about the Cynthia Calvillo fight. Calvillo really forced her to fight off her back foot in that main event fight that they had, which she's a counter striker. She throws a lot of jabs. She does stay tight, like in her high guard. She has a classic boxing high guard, straight punch. She does drop her hands a lot, trying to catch kicks, which makes her get kicked a lot. Cynthia Calvillo had success throwing a high kick over her guard. Joanne Calderwood had a lot of success throwing high kicks over her guard. Obviously, Valentina Shevchenko had success with the kicks. She has no power, as I mentioned. She likes to attack leg kicks. She beat Vivian Araujo with leg kicks. That's a fight that I think they ran it back. There was just one of those like head scratcher, like, wow, Jessica Ai beat Vivian Araujo, but I feel like they fought right now. Araujo would style on her. She can get takedowns, but either shooting on your hips or catching kick. I'm talking about Jessica Ai right now, and I feel like I'm talking monotone just because that's how I feel about Jessica Ai. Like I'm boring myself talking about her. Like I'm literally talking, and I'm like, oh my god, people must be bored listening to this. That's just Jessica Ai. Like I know like people hate Jessica Ai. I don't hate her. Like she's fun. Like, but like I'm not entertained by her. But on top game, top side grappling is their best game. She's got pretty good, solid top control. She isn't much of a submission threat. She has only one submission win in her career. She struggled to stop takedowns against a much smaller Cynthia Calvea and really struggled to get her off. Now moving to Jennifer Maia, also not a great athlete. You mentioned she's well-rounded. I agree with that. I'd say she's an okay boxer. She does attack with combos. She throws much harder than Jessica Ai does. She has she holds her ground. Like we talked about this last time. She likes to hold her ground. Like, I'm going to stand here. I'm not going to back up, and I'm going to try to time you coming in. And that's good for someone like, actually, I'll do well against Jessica Ai, who doesn't have a lot of variety in her attacks. But this style really relies on picking up the person's timing. It also makes you a stationary target. Alex Volkanovski has a very similar style like this. Alex Volkanovski is a guy that it works so well against Max Holloway that he refused to give ground, refused to kind of be on the end of Max Holloway's punches by that. I'm probably going down talking about Max Holloway and Alex Volkanovski because that's much more interesting than this fight. That's probably why I'm going down that road. But back into this one. But it's why she didn't have success against Caitlin Chikagian, because Kate Chikagian was moving so much and varying her attacks when she came in that she really struggled to pick her timing. But you mentioned that if she comes in, sometimes she'll just like unhook you as you come in, push you against the cage, strong in the clinch, good dirty boxing, good takedowns. She kind of grinds similar to Zhumagulov, who we talked about in the beginning. Will push you against the cage, grind on you, look for a trip inside. If you try to take her down, she's got strong takedown defense, and she is a submission threat. Now, as a prediction, I'm kind of done with Jessica Ai. I don't see anything she does that's better than Maia. I think Maia hits harder. I think she's a better grappler. I doubt she gets a stoppage because Jessica Ai is hard to finish, unless you have Valentina Shevchenko. But most girls would be hard to stop Jessica Ai. So I think Maia cruises to a victory. I like Maia by decision. I'm pretty confident in this pick. I think Maia wins fairly easily.
And we are back in the middleweight division as Trevin Giles takes on Dricus du Plessis. Giles, the 28-year-old Texan, is 14-2 overall. He's 5-2 in the UFC. He is currently on a 3-fight winning streak, having competed most recently in March at UFC on ESPN, Brunson versus Holland, where he took a unanimous decision over Roman Dolidze. He'll be taking on du Plessis, the 27-year-old South African, is 15-2 overall. He is 1-0 in the UFC. He made a successful debut last October, knocking out Marcus Perez in the first round at UFC Fight Night Moraes versus Sandhagen. Odds as of Wednesday of fight week are a pick'em right now. Both men are out there right at -110. Keith, Trevin Giles, the one fighter we can always agree upon, as he is both a Houstonian and a police officer.
Yeah.
I will kick this one to you first. How do you see this fight playing out, and who you got?
Yeah, the official fighter of the Shilton and Duffy show, of course. Our man, Trevin Giles. We just were talking about the Maia Ai fight being terrible. Like, this one's fun. I'm excited for this one. I think both guys are well-rounded. Giles, lots of movement, fast hands. They always talk about his stinging jab, and I say stinging because it's a power jab. He hurts people with a jab. He dropped Bevan Lewis recently with a jab. We talked about in the past, it's an up jab, similar to what Floyd Mayweather does. So he throws it down from his hips, but that clears everything that come in when you throw an up jab. Now, there's a lot of negatives to it. We're not going to talk about that, but he's got nice power. He can be, and I shouldn't just talk about his jab because he does have secondary tools, but it's that his jab is so good that it kind of overshadows. It's like when people talk about Conor McGregor's left hand. Well, his left hand is so good that it overshadows everything else he does. He can be low output at times, Trevin Giles, and he tends to cruise a little bit. He has a little of that Jorge Masvidal thing where he gets ahead with his boxing and he kind of gets a little stagnant. He can also chase the KO, looking to land one single big strike at a time, which is never the way to go. The KO happens. You can't really chase it. He keeps his hands low. It hurts him defensively because you rely so much on head movement, but it helps with disguising the jab that we talked about just a minute ago. I like his leg kicks. He got nice power leg kicks. He's a very physically strong guy. You just look at him, and he just looks like a strong dude. Like I feel like without knowing anything about it, I feel like he just goes in like the weight room. He can just throws 350 on and benches it like 8 times and no problem. Uh, but he's known for his striking, but he's a good grappler too. He's strong. He can grind against the fence. He can shoot from the outside. Good entries. I don't think he wrestles enough, and I think it's something that he needs to add, especially as he moves up the rankings. It just makes him more of a dual threat. But he showed that he can out-grapple. Like Bevan Lewis tried to take him down. Roman Dolidze tried to take him down. They really struggled to get him down. He has been submitted in the past, so maybe that's why he has been. He doesn't use his wrestling enough. But I think those are more flagrant. One was a back and forth barn burner against Zach Cummings. And I think he just kind of got caught. Now move over to Plessis. A lot of stance switching from this guy. Likes to fight from both stances. He's a counter striker. Good power. I mean, we saw that against Marcus Perez in his first fight. Just landed one shot, put him out. But there was a lot of things I didn't like in that fight. Like he doesn't handle pressure well. He backs straight up. I mean, he was easily getting backed up by Marcus Perez. He also has a pillaring defense, which you've heard me talk about in the past. I don't think it works unless you're got big gloves in boxing. He also was overreacting to Perez's shots a little bit. He was kind of flopping with everything was getting hit. And while it didn't put him down, if you really overreact when you get hit, that doesn't look good for the judges. It makes the shots look worse than it is. But I like that he, even despite seeming kind of overwhelmed, he kept sticking to his game plan of going after the leg kicks. That shows like a savvy veteran. And he does, you go back to, outside of the UFC, he showed a deep submission game. Not the best wrestler, but he can get the fight to the ground. But he has a big submission game once he gets it there. I haven't seen as much of Duplessis that I should have as I would have liked to. Sometimes you kind of have to sacrifice fights. However, from what I have seen, I think Giles is the better boxer. Plus, let's be honest, Giles is the official fighter of the Shill and Duffy show. I wasn't going to pick against him. But I also think he's the better wrestler. Duplessis might catch him in a submission. I think that's Duplessis' best chance of winning, or just landing a huge big shot like he did against Perez. However, I think Giles cruises here. I think he picks him apart on the feet. I think he throws in maybe a takedown. Give me Giles by decision. And when I was looking, I was writing down my notes. I had him as a small underdog, but at -110, I think he should be like -150. So I'm gonna lock Giles in as I think this is my bet of the night. So I think this is the best bet of the night. So if you like to gamble and you're dumb enough to take my advice, please gamble responsibly. Don't bet the mortgage. But if you want to put a little dollars, I like Trevin Giles to get the victory.
I like a lot of what you laid out there, and I say this as somebody who obviously I like it when Giles wins, but he's 5-2 in the UFC right now. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, but there's a lot of kind of but about those 3 fights, if that makes any sense. Like, it's just feels like it's kind of held together with a little bit of like duct tape and baling wire. Like the James Krause fight, you can argue that he should have lost that fight against like a lightweight stepping up on 36 hours notice that like literally had to put a shot of tequila down, and probably go buy like a boil and bite mouth guard from someplace in Abu Dhabi. Like, and then, Bevan Lewis, a guy that if he hasn't been released from the UFC, he's on death's doorstep. And then Roman Dolidze, where that looks a little better now that Dolidze like seems to be the real deal at 185. But to me, he's still he doesn't have as much momentum as a guy with 3 straight wins in the 185-pound division should. A convincing win over Duplessis would certainly do wonders for that. I wrote off Duplessis ahead of his debut. I was like, you know what? I've seen a lot of EFC fights. It's not a super high level route for fight, talent to make it to the UFC. It's not like you're like, oh, this guy went 11-1 in Brave CF. You're like, he's gonna wreck shop. And then in his in his KSW run, his best fights were against Roberto Soldic. They were at welterweight. Side note, I don't know how Duplessis made welterweight. He's not a small middleweight. He's kind of a jack dude. His best route to victory, probably hurting Giles, and Giles shoots right into a guillotine. Like, Giles is susceptible to the guillotine. Duplessis gets a lot of them. He has a fast guillotine and a good squeeze, but I'm not picking that. I think you're right. I think Giles, better boxer, harder hitter, like harder natural hitter. Like, Duplessis could clearly wind up and hurt somebody, but like you said, like, his jab just hurts because he's a big, strong dude with good technique. I expect that Giles is gonna bust up Duplessis pretty good, and I'm still not completely sold on Dricus Duplessis just from wasting Marcus Perez, who just he's out of the UFC now. He was not UFC level, just by the results. So I'm going for Giles on this one as well. And I'm gonna say he actually just gets the job done. When he starts to really flow, starts to throw combinations, he can do a lot of damage. This might end up looking a bit like the Bevin Lewis fight later, as Giles just started to roll downhill on him, sat him down with a jab, a nasty jab, and then finished it. So give me Trevin Giles by round 3 TKO. Second from the top of the UFC 264 prelims, at least as the lineup is currently constituted, is a featherweight matchup between Ryan Hall and the red-hot prospect Ilia Topuria. Hall, the 36-year-old Virginia native, is 8-1 overall. He is 4-0 in the UFC. He has not fought in almost exactly 2 years. He last fought at UFC Fight Night Durandamy versus Ladd, where he took a unanimous decision over Darren Elkins. Before that, you have to go all the way back to December of 2018 for his famous, infamous, now legendary heel hook submission of BJ Penn, marking the first time the Prodigy had ever been submitted in MMA competition. He's taking on Topuria, the 24-year-old fighting out of Spain, even though he is, I believe, Georgian, is a perfect 10-0 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC, having looked very impressive in a unanimous decision win over Youssef Zalal, and then a first-round knockout of Damon Jackson, that last one coming at UFC on ESPN, Hermanson versus Vettori last December. Topuria, the pretty strong favorite here. He is minus 230. You can get Hall at plus 185, plus 190. I haven't done any research. I should probably get with Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie before I make this kind of claim, even when it's an opinion-based thing, just because he has this photographic memory and can bring up things I might have forgotten about. But I'm going to jump out on a limb and say that outside of heavyweights and outside of maybe like women's featherweights, this is one of the highest level fights you'll see in the UFC between two guys with 10 fights or less. Like, it's kind of just surprising. Hall obviously has all of his grappling accomplishments, both in and out of MMA. And then Topuria just has all the look of a future contender, if not champ. And it's just kind of funny to think that they're guys with 9 fights and 10 fights respectively. Hall has claimed for several years that nobody wants to fight him. Finally, he has somebody that wants to fight him, and I'll kick it to you. Like, how do you see this one going?
Can you just read the odds again for me?
Yep, Topuria is minus 230, Hall plus 190.
To me, that's insane. Not that Topuria is the favorite, but nobody should be a 230 favorite against Ryan Hall. Like, he's that skilled, and he can end a fight so quickly that I wouldn't favor the champion over him that big, And well, I'm not picking Ryan Hall to be a UFC champion, especially not at his age, and his lack of activity obviously hurts. But like, it's not out of the realm of possibility. If you told me 2 years from now Ryan Hall's UFC champion, I'd be like, holy crap, he rode that specialty all the way to UFC title. Like I said, I'm not picking it, but it wouldn't shock me. Now, as I mentioned, he's 36 years old. He's been out for 2 years. Let's talk about skills. He's a southpaw. He keeps his hands really low. His boxing is pretty much non-existent. Even though it's non-existent, he makes it even worse by throwing one single strike at a time. He does use movement really well. He does use movement well to get you to chase him and overextend he'll get you to chase him and overextend on your shots trying to catch up to him, where then he drops underneath you and either goes for an entry, though it's not really successful, or he does a lot of Imanari rolls. He does a lot of kicks too. He uses kicks. He likes the Holly Holm push kick. He uses kicks to get at the range where he wants, where he's all in the outside and he's kicking to land points, and then you have to, because he's using his kicks on the outside, you have to crash the pocket again. Talking about when he's chasing you, where he Imanari rolls underneath you. He also he will fall down when you hit him. He doesn't fall down like you knock him out, but he'll fall down trying to get you to thinking he's hurt, baiting you into falling into his guard. He did it a lot against Darren Elkins. He'll try high level stuff like spinning wheel kicks. One, because it hurts if he lands it, and he actually did land it against Darren Elkins. But also, if he misses, again, he'll just use that as he falls on the ground, hoping you follow him and make mistakes. Does the same with spinning back fists. It's another thing he'll do. He'll spin back all the way to on the ground. But the reason why he wants to get on the ground is, obviously, when you think about Ryan Hall, he's a wizard. He's amazing on the ground. He does kind of struggle to get there. He has weak entries, but he's creative how he gets it. He'll jump guard even more. He does Imanari rolls, and if he gets you, if he gets a hold of you, he'll backpack you, ride you out, or even worse, he'll get one of your legs, leg lock, heel hook. BJ Penn one that mentioned is legendary, especially when you figure BJ Penn at one time was known for his jiu-jitsu, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu guys. Now, obviously, jiu-jitsu advances, and this is not prime BJ Penn, but still an accomplishment itself. One other negative about Ryan Hall, though, is when he doesn't get the Imanari roll and he doesn't get you down, he tends to lay on his back a little too much, leave himself like his opponent hanging over him. He likes that because he's hoping the opponent makes a mistake, goes to kick him, and then he kind of rolls and catches the kick. But a lot of times they're just giving away points. Darren Elkins stayed on that game plan more, leaning over him, throwing punches down in his face, kicking him. Darren Elkins might actually won that fight. Now move over to Topuria. This is your classic wrestler boxer. Jumps into range so well, where he just gets in the pocket, lands hard hooks, crushing body shots. I love his overhand right. He's got really nice power. He's a very, very good wrestler too. Greco-Roman background, incredible hip control. I mean, you could see it. He suplex Yusuf Zalal. He is a Brazilian to black belt. He also, so he looks to advanced position. He is a submission threat, and he's aggressive to get submissions. He loves head attacks. What you think about, wrestlers with submission background, Darce Chokers, Anacondas. He loves his topside guillotine. I mentioned last time it's similar to Jack Hermanson, where he sets it up while he's on top. Similar to what Chad Mendes tried doing to Conor McGregor in their fight when he kind of was about to gas out. Cardio has been an issue, though, in the past. I've seen him slow down. Now, as far as predictions go, this is one of the hardest fights to pick, which is why I'm so shocked that Topuria is such a massive favorite. Ryan Hall reminds me, and brace yourself a little bit because this might be a little extreme, but Ryan Hall reminds me of Charles Oliveira from 2 years ago, or 3 years ago maybe. And what I mean by that is he doesn't have the boxing that Oliveira has, but he has a serviceable kick game that he uses to get you to have to crash the pocket. And that's exactly what Charles Oliveira did. Charles Oliveira, the boxer, that was never really known for his, now he's got a great jab. Now he's a very good boxer, but that wasn't his game 2 or 3 years ago. That's kind of where Ryan Hall is, because like Charles Oliveira, if he gets you down, this guy's a wizard. Despite saying that and thinking the odds are way off, and it's probably because I'm not super confident in my pick, I'm still taking Topuria. And the reason why I'm taking Topuria is I simply love this dude. I mean, as I do pretty much all wrestle boxers, but I really like this guy. I mean, the Georgia thing is they're taking over MMA right now. They're red hot, the whole country of Georgia. He's so well-rounded. That said, and the reason why I'm not confident is he has to be perfect for 15 minutes. You could be winning for 14 minutes and 45 seconds, and all Ryan Hall needs is 15 seconds or less, 3 seconds to end that fight. I think Topuria does do it. I think he's good enough in the grappling exchange, because there's going to be grappling exchanges. I think he's good enough to get the top control, not get caught by Hall, land some hard shots while he's on top. Also, picking, knows when a Hall starts moving, his hips start moving, maybe jump back off, let him back up, and then start landing his hard shots, his body punches, his overhand right, and doesn't make the mistake. But it's one of those ones when you're, especially if you gamble, I would never bet on it. When you're watching this fight, you're going to be nervous all the time. If you pick, you pick Topuria and you bet on him, you're going to be nervous until the final, seconds. So that's why I think the odds are so off. Anyways, give me Topuria, give me by decision.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to be nervous when watching this fight. Man, so this is a hypothetical that we throw out just about every time, but if there's a UFC featherweight decathlon, guess who's coming in last? Like Ryan Hall is the male like counterpart to like Roxanne Modafferi. Where it is unbelievable the extent to which he is overachieved in comparison to his apparent athleticism just through craft. And it's more than just, hey, I'm a great grappler. As you pointed out right off the top, he has built a game that just runs incredibly well for what he does well. And I'm not sure whether you said this flat out or just kind of teed it up for me to say. It's effective not only in that it puts him in the best position to finish the fight, but it even puts him in a position to win rounds. And when you're a guy like that, winning rounds is tough. Our viewers won't see this, but I did send you something in the chat. I don't know if you've seen this before, but somebody, I believe it's on Reddit/MMA, did a diagram of Ryan Hall's, like his whole game, but it's just hook, kick, flop, repeat. So there's that for you. I want to just pick Hall without reservation and just say, he's like Topuria, as promising as he is just too green. He's going to run into trouble here. But not only is Hall like a minus athlete by UFC standards, Topuria is a plus athlete, like a plus athlete by UFC standards. The disparity in athleticism between these two guys is going to be shocking to witness. And that's what worries me, because I'm confident in Hall's ability to catch Topuria and tap him out with something, or just win 2 rounds out of 3, except that I also wouldn't be surprised if Topuria just comes out and the difference in speed is so great that he's just able to get inside of Hall's kicks, pound him to the body, and knock him out. Like, I mean, he's not on Hall's level, but Damon Jackson came into the Topuria fight with basically the same routes to victory that Hall would have, and Topuria just shellacked him. And if Hall is staring up at the lights 2 minutes into this fight, I can't say I was that surprised. But even though he is a greater than 2-1 underdog here, I'm not buying that. I'm thinking Ryan Hall gets it done, and who knows, it might spell the end of his UFC career, because if he beats Topuria badly and derails like the hype train of one of the hottest prospects in this division, man, if you think he had a hard time getting fights before, nobody is going to want to touch this dude with a 10-foot pole after, because 1, he's going to beat you. 2, you're not going to look good doing it. And 3, it's probably going to be a heel hook. Give me Ryan Hall by second round submission in a pretty big upset, at least on the books. At the top of the UFC 264 prelims is a welterweight matchup that seems to promise fireworks and has a good bit of divisional relevance as well, as Niko Price takes on Michel Pereira. Price, the 31-year-old Floridian, is 14-4 with 2 no contests in his overall career. He's 6-4 with 2 no contests in his UFC career. He fought most recently last September to a majority draw with Donald Cerrone. That was overturned into a no contest when Price tested positive for cannabis, something which, after today, will never happen again. If you haven't heard the news, the Nevada State Athletic Commission has decided to stop penalizing fighters for the devil's lettuce.
Now, if we don't get the Olympics to do the same.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
It almost makes me feel good that MMA isn't the only sport that like, is this dumb? Because, we're still talking about, well, that's just Nevada. We have, 30 other commissions in the U.S. and a bunch of non-commission areas plus the whole world. But hey, at least it's Nevada. It's a start. Anyway.
And the same day that they announced that no more testing for weed, or they wouldn't punish for weed, there's rumor that Nick Diaz is back.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Nick Diaz is back. Which means that Price is going to have a hard time actually catching Diaz in the race for the most weed suspensions in UFC history. That's a shame. Looks like that race is probably over.
Did you feel like once you've passed this law, you go back and just overturn all those stupid things for no contest, just overturn them?
Oh yeah,
like go back to originally what it was ruled.
Yeah, well, if they did that, hell, Matt Riddle would probably come back.
There you go.
Anyway,
that wasn't weed though. That wasn't weed.
Wasn't it?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking about Matt Hamill. Sorry, I was thinking about.
No.
I was thinking about John Jones, Matt Hamill.
No. I Matt Riddle. You remember the guy from Tough with the big mushroom tattooed on his. Honestly, with the big mushroom tattooed on him, it's probably kind of surprising that weed's all he ever popped for.
Yeah. He's the wrestler, right? W wrestler now.
Yeah. He's apparently become a pretty famous one. That's out of my wheelhouse, but he's still doing it. So
yeah, good for him.
Yeah. Well, Price after that 5-minute detour.
Wait, well, that's because we were celebrating by smoking weed. That's why we went off on a tangent ourselves.
He's taken on Pereira. The 27-year-old Brazilian is 25-11 with 2 no contests overall. He is 3-2 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight winning streak over Salim Imadaev, whom he choked out last September, and then Kalen Chaos Williams, over whom he took a unanimous decision back in December at Fight Night Thompson versus Neal. Odds are fairly close on this one, but Pereira is the favorite. He's minus 150, minus 155 or so. You can get Price at plus 130. Keith, who do you like in this one?
I like the matchmaker. That's who I like, because this was one of those. I believe this was one of those fights when we did like who should they fight next. We were like Niko Price and Michel Pereira. Like that would be insane. This fight is just gonna be nuts. I'm just killing time as I'm scrolling through my notes. I couldn't find my notes. Somehow I ended up on the Jessica I fight again. Like this is the complete opposite of the Jessica I fight. So I'll start with Niko Price. This guy loves a brawl. He's got huge power. He's a great athlete. Like he really is. He's a wild man, pure chaos, presses the action, willing to eat a punch to land one of his own. And all that, like he loves that, and fans love him for that. But he really shouldn't fight that way because he's not bad as a technically sound fighter when he tries to slow down and then actually win a kickboxing match, because he can do it. He's a long and rangy fighter. He has a nice jab. He's got some skill. Like he has natural power, as we talked about. He doesn't like being pressured, though. Like we talked about this last time. Vicente Luque and Jeff Neal both had success by kind of forcing him on the back foot. But another thing about Niko Price that he doesn't get credit for is how good he is in close. Like he can grapple. He's in the clinch, strong elbows, strong knees. He uses his height well to get good angles to land those knees and elbows. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but he's got a good submission game and does well to scramble, keep his hips moving. Sometimes he scrambles into bad positions because that goes back to this wild man chaos. But we've seen him get some of the craziest finishes in UFC history. Talking about crazy, you can't not say crazy without mentioning Michel Pereira. Massive welterweight, crazy athlete, incredible movement, so fluid, so explosive, big power. He stalks his prey. He's constantly moving forward. He's got these long arms and legs. He uses feints well, but we've actually seen him start stopping some of the stupid things he was doing, the dancing, the flips. While it's fun to see it every once in a while, maybe just give us one flip and then one like run off the cage or one split punch or whatever you want to do, a moonwalk, backhand, whatever you want to do once and then like go back. Because when we've seen him actually calm down and actually want to win a fight like he did against Amedovski, he showed good distance strikings against Imadaev. Good kicks, the oblique kicks, the teep kicks. attacks to the body with punches and kicks, his step-in knees. One thing that he gets categorized as being wild, the wild man thing, which I don't think it should be, is his flying knees, because he actually does use them with purpose, other than the backflip. Like when he does a flying knee, one, he does it to obviously hurt his opponent, but when he's doing it offensively, he uses it to close the distance to land on something, or just kind of, I'm on the outside kicking, and then you don't expect this, you back up toward the cage, and now I close, you can't back up, and I throw a flying knee. But he also uses it defensively. If you come in at him, he likes to stop your attack by throwing up that flying knee. And also, like, if you're wrestling, he uses a flying knee, you're probably not going to shoot next time, because your mind's there. But speaking of wrestling, he showed recently he's not a bad wrestler himself. Go back to the Diego Sanchez fight. He slammed Diego Sanchez. He suplexed Amedovski. He took in Chaos Williams. He took Chaos Williams down multiple times in their fight. So if he can stay calm, which I don't know if that'll be the case with Niko Price, he's got some skills. So this fight is pure insanity. How do you pick a winner? I don't know. Like I don't know. Like who's a better athlete? Like I think it's the first time Niko Price has ever faced someone who's a better athlete than pure like athleticism in Michel Pereira. We talk about the decathlon. Ryan Hall finished last. Michel Pereira probably finished him first. And like when he does like the high jump, he's or like he's the guy that what's the triple jump? Like Michel Pereira would do the triple jump, but like at the third jump, he'd like do a flip while he, so not the best technical. And like I told you, these guys fighter, but like you don't know what you get with these guys, both guys. If the fighter who actually decides to be technical will probably win. The guy who decides not to waste all his energy. I've seen Michel Pereira do that more recently than Niko Price. So because of that, I'm going to go with a gut call, and I'm going to say Pereira wins. But you know what? Nah, screw it. Like, you go crazy and see what happens. Give me Michel Pereira by flying butt drop on Niko Price's head. I don't know. First round flying butt drop. Triple axle butt drop.
There you heard it. If you want to take the prop on that, on the word of Keith Chillen, just keep in mind that America's community colleges are really, really good these days, so your kids will be fine.
Yeah, Michel. But the thing is, and the odds of Michel Pereira by triple axle, it's probably like only like 2-1 odds. Yeah.
The funny thing about Niko Price, I don't know if it's funny, but the thing that stands out to me about Niko Price is just how self-destructive and counterproductive he's been over the course of his UFC career. I mean, well, obviously the fact that he's had 2 fights overturned, due to drug tests, regardless of how you feel about weed in competition. And obviously Keith's and my take on that is pretty obvious. Should have been probably legal all along. He knew the rules, and he's still, been busted twice. And both times it cost him, a draw against Donald Cerrone, not bad. The win against Alex Morono, especially considering that was like a buzzer beater KO in a fight in which he'd been actually getting kind of worked. It's a shame. And then you look at his actual real losses. I would argue that, he's lost to Vicente Luque twice. He's lost to Abdul Razak Al Hassan and Jeff Neal. I think if he fights to his best advantage and isn't just a complete wild man, he probably wins 2 of those 4. Like, he doesn't get knocked out in 40 seconds by Abdul Razak Al Hassan.
He did much better against Jeff Neal than anybody expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, the flip side of it is he has a couple of just the weirdest win finishes that you'll ever see in the UFC. There's the Randy Brown thing that will literally never be repeated. We will never see that again, where he's got his shin bracing Randy Brown's head and knocks him out with hammer fists, like almost like looking over his shoulder. He KO'd James Vick, one of the cleanest up kick KOs I've ever seen in an American promotion. Like, Niko Price is what he is, and you're going to get what you get with him. It's Pereira that's actually kind of surprised me. As soon as he lost to Tristan Connolly, I said, okay, that's what the ceiling is. Like, he'll give us some highlights, but he's never actually going to move into contention. Like his pace is too furious, and then he is such a specimen. Of course, his gas tank was going to be a problem, and then all of a sudden, it's not anymore. The Caleb Williams fight, it wasn't a complete barn burner, but it was a pretty briskly paced fight with a good amount of wrestling. He was fine. If anything, he was the fresher man in the third round. He finished Imadaev in the third round after throwing his ass all around the cage for 2.5 rounds. That's what worries me. Yeah, like if Pereira comes in and just kind of fights the steady for him fight, like this is a tough call for Niko Price, but this is more of a step up in competition for Pereira than it is for Price. And because of that, I have a little bit more of a prove it feel about him than I do about Price. Like Price has both lost to and beaten some guys that are at least as accomplished as Pereira. You can't really say the opposite. So I am going to go with Price on this one. If, there's a triple axle knockout in the first round, I'll come take my lumps in the recap, even though Keith won't be there. I will definitely, give him his props. But give me Niko Price to win this by decision in a wild fight and a likely fight of the night front runner.
This is probably just going to be a double knockout. Like for these two guys, this is the most likely outcome. Just double knockout.
Double knockout. And
Spinning
then,
back fists both land at the same time.
Nothing would
somehow
surprise me.
It knocks out the referee at the same time. Like the way they fall, they both kick the referee in the head, and all three of them are knocked out.
This is starting to sound like a pro wrestling spot. Yep. Then somebody runs in with a chair. The 6-fight main card of UFC 264 kicks off with a welterweight scrap between Carlos Condit and Max Griffin. Condit, the 37-year-old New Mexico native, the former WEC welterweight champion, the former UFC interim welterweight champion, is 32-13 in his storied career. He is an even 9-9 in the UFC. He is currently on a 2-fight winning streak over some fellow veterans in Court McGee, whom he beat last October by unanimous decision, and Matt Brown, whom he beat by unanimous decision in January at UFC on ABC 1. That snapped a 5-fight losing streak for Condit, though in fairness to Condit, it was top 10 fighters all the way down or close to in Michael Chiesa, Alex Oliveira, Neil Magny, Damian Maia, and Robbie Lawler. He'll be taking on Griffin. The 35-year-old Sacramento native is 17-8 overall. He is 5-6 in the UFC. He also is on a 2-fight winning streak, having knocked out Kenan Song in the first round at UFC on ESPN Brunson versus Holland back in March, and having pummeled Ramiz Brahimaj into a doctor stoppage back in November. If you recall that one, it was where a punch or forearm strike basically shredded Brahimaj's ear. It was disgusting. The fight was over. He was probably winning it anyway. Odds here do favor the younger man. Griffin is -185. Condit is available at +160 if you like him as the one to extend his winning streak further. Keith Schillen, whom do you like in this fight?
This is another really interesting stylistic matchup. So Carlos Condit, I was counting him out. Like I was done with him. 37 years old. What'd you expect? But he's on a nice little run right now, and yeah, I don't think his skills nearly diminished as much as I thought it did. Like I was completely there. Like I thought he was off the cliff, but he still switches stances, can fight from both stances. He's light on his feet, good output. He gets inside, throws power hooks. I mean, he throws them from his hips, as he always has. He throws them from a lot of scoop uppercuts, like scoop hooks, like throwing from his hip, throwing everything. Underrated power, like I don't know if I should know if I should say underrated. I mean, everyone always thinks of Carlos Condit. You think of that crazy knockout of Dan Hardy, but generally speaking, not known for the biggest puncher, but he does hurt guys with his shots, which is funny considering he pulls his punches a lot. He pulls, you know what I mean by pulling punching. When you throw a strike, you pull your head back to kind of avoid, which is funny that he still generates good power. A lot of kicks from the outside, good leg kicks, good hard body kicks. He does really well to stay on the outside, kind of get you with those kicks, and then suddenly he bursts into range, and that's when he's firing off those hard hooks. Some holes defensively, especially that he keeps his chin high in the air. He's taken tons of damage. I mean, you think about, like the 25-minute war against Robbie Lawler, for example. Weak offensive wrestler, though we've seen him win recently with his offensive wrestling against Matt Brown. Terrible defensive wrestler, one of the historically bad defensive wrestler. But if he gets on top of you, good ground and pound. He is a submission threat. I do think, and I say this for his whole career, I think his submission game is a little overrated. I don't think he was as big of a threat on the ground, specifically catching a submission as he gets credited for. Move on to Max Griffin, not a great athlete, but he's so well-rounded. He's so technical. He's a pressure striker that also stays technical. High guard defense. His punches stay tight. Busy jab, straight right is very accurate. I want to back up and say I said he's not a good athlete, but I don't mean that as an insult. Like I mean it as a compliment. Like he's not going to wow you with his speed. He's just going to wow you with how composed he stays, his game plan. He's intelligent. I do think so. Like his straight right is very accurate. He headhunts a little bit more like that. I'd like for him to go to the body a little bit more, but he mixes in takedowns. I wouldn't say he's a powerful wrestler, but he can win by, he wins rounds with his grappling, and he has good cardio. Last time I said that he didn't have one punch knockout power. Well, we can't say that anymore after his last fight, as he showed that maybe he's come into his power at this point of his career. So as a prediction, if Condit wins, I wouldn't be shocked at all. However, Griffin looks so good in his last fight. He's always a tough out, no matter who he's facing. I thought Condit fell off a cliff years ago. That's not true, but I'm not willing to pull him up. I'm still ready to push him off that cliff, I think. I think the floor is going to fall out of him soon. And I think this might be the beginning of it. Give me Griffin. Condit is so tough. Like, you can't get Carlos Condit out of there, especially, knocking him out on the feet. So give me Griffin. Give me Griffin by decision.
Yeah, I'm feeling what you're feeling here. For one, I mean, I didn't think Carlos Condit was going to come back after the Chiesa fight. It was a 5-fight losing streak, and he appeared to have walked away from the sport. And I was not sad to see him go. And I don't mean that in any negative sense. I mean, Carlos Condit is one of the awesomest fighters ever. Just, it looked like he was done. And, why keep taking beatings, if you don't have to. But yeah, I mean, he's looked pretty good since he's been back, but it's against two guys who are at least as far on the downslope of their own careers as he is, and probably were not quite as good as he is, even to start with at their, well, definitely not in the case of McGee, but even in the case of Brown, like Brown at his greatest ever, was not quite as good as Condit at his greatest ever. What I never thought I'd see is the day that Max Griffin was favored over Carlos Condit, and I agreed. Like, if you put those two guys on, like, there was like a line graph where, they start like this, I never thought it would cross, but it has. Griffin is a comfortable favorite here. And yeah, I'm feeling it as well. And it's not just a case of Condit being totally washed. Like, Griffin's just made some incremental improvements over the course of his career. I like that you said he was just kind of calm and composed and smart. I mean, the first time I really noticed and thought about that was when he beat Mike Perry. I thought he was going to be a great bounce back fight for Mike Perry, and Perry was just going to punt his head into the fifth row of seats. That was not the case. He fought a real good, smart fight against him. And his last two fights, I mean, Kenan Song, aside from Perry, might be the best win of his career yet. He's 35. His game has never really run on fast twitch athleticism, so there's no reason he should be dropping off anytime, in the next year or two. This is probably the best Max Griffin we've ever seen. Even with the nice little feel-good story, this is definitely end stage Carlos Condit. I hate to call it, I wouldn't be sad at all to see the upset, wouldn't be sad to be wrong about this one. but I think you're right. Give me Max Griffin by decision, and I don't think he finishes Condit either, but I think it's just going to kind of look a little bit dispiriting. Like, Condit's going to go into the third round knowing he's losing, knowing he needs the finish. That's typically the kind of place where he would thrive, and he's just not going to have another gear to engage, or like, he's not going to have any deeper to dig. I don't have any more cliches to use about that. So just, give me Max Griffin by decision. Next up, it is a bantamweight matchup featuring Sugar Sean O'Malley. O'Malley, the 26-year-old from Montana, is 13-1 in his mixed martial arts career. He's 5-1 in the UFC. He fought most recently in March at UFC 260, walloping Thomas Almeida for 2.5 rounds before knocking him out midway through the third with a just single brutal right hand. That allowed him to bounce back from his first career loss, which was to Marlon Vera last August, where he was knocked out with ground and pound after hurting his leg kind of midway through the first round. He had been scheduled to fight Louis Smolka on this card. Smolka withdrew a week or two ago with an undisclosed injury or illness, and half of the UFC bantamweight division immediately raised its hand and started waving frantically that they wanted to step in. The UFC ignored all of those people and signed CES MMA veteran Kris Moutinho. Moutinho, the 28-year-old from Milford, Massachusetts, is 9-4 overall. Obviously, will be making his UFC debut, but he does come in on a 2-fight winning streak. He fought at CFFC just at the end of May, defeating Andrew Salas by arm triangle choke in the third round. That was actually his first career fight outside of CES. Moutinho, a massive underdog here. Obviously, odds are all over the place, but right now you can get O'Malley around -800, Moutinho around +550, even closer to +600 as the huge underdog. When he was signed, I went and watched a few more of his fights. He looks to me like a guy that might be an interesting addition to the Contender Series sometime in the next year. But even at that level of prospect, the things he does well do not match up well with O'Malley. Like, O'Malley will be bigger. He will be so much faster. Like, the difference in speed on the feet will be blinding. Moutinho at the CES level, not a bad wrestler, but unless O'Malley's wheels are completely blown from these last couple of injuries, he's not going to have any success getting O'Malley to the ground. Really, the only question for me here is how O'Malley wins. The UFC passed over people like Brian Kelleher who wanted to step up and fight O'Malley. I even thought Louis Smolka was a decent. I thought he was a decent next test. He was hovering around, +250 when he pulled out, but tough, well-rounded guy who does everything pretty well and had never been knocked out. That's the perfect guy to tell you where Sean O'Malley is at in his career right now. Kris Moutinho is not the guy to tell you how Sean O'Malley is at. This shouldn't be close. If it is close, that's a problem. What I'm really looking at is, is Sean O'Malley, is he now a guy that we have to look at as an injury-prone guy? Like, do we need to throw in healthy O'Malley in with like the healthy Cruz, healthy Kane type, caveats that we use in describing fighters who fall short of what their greatness might have been? That's my real question. He has a movement-heavy style. If his knees are blown, like that's a problem. And I'm not saying he can't retool from that and still be a great fighter. He's only 26 years old. While he is a laughable goofball outside the cage and not really much fun to listen to, he's pretty smart in the cage. And I think of him as a guy who would be capable of making the kind of adjustments he would need to. But I mean, that's really something to debate later. Right now, give me Sean O'Malley by, it better be a highlight reel knockout. I mean, when they put you in as a 10-1 favorite over somebody, just winning a decision isn't really enough to raise your stock. Like, he needs to prove that this guy doesn't belong in the cage with him. But yeah, O'Malley by first round knockout. Probably a one punch, like just drop him and walk away. Highlight reel knockout.
Face planner. Yeah.
Yep, face planner. Eddie Wineland.
Yeah.
Type thing. Yep.
Yeah, that look away punch he did on the Contender Series. Yeah, O'Malley, I mean, I understand where you come from with the injuries and stuff, and that movement is such a big part of his game. I thought he looked good against Thomas Almeida. He's got so much athleticism, like even in the Thomas Almeida fight. So elusive. He's long and lengthy, can fight from both stances, and he does fight from both stances. He's really good at picking up his opponent's timing. He uses feints to create openings. He's very, very accurate with his strikes. Tons of variety. Quick jab. His slip and rip right hand is a thing of beauty. It really, his slip and rip right hand reminds me of 2016 Conor, but the opposite. Left. Obviously, left versus right. Has serious power. Loves those flashy spinning attacks. Defensively, he keeps his hands high. He stays focused with his hands. The only defensive flaw that I've seen in his striking is what cost him against Marlon Chito Vera doesn't check leg kicks, which I don't know if it's been fixed yet. He grapples in jiu-jitsu tournaments. I haven't seen much of his offensive grappling. He's a weak defensive wrestler, and cardio was a little bit of an issue against Terrion Ware, a little bit of an issue against Andre Sigmatot. Obviously, an injury against Andre Sigmatot was a bigger issue, but that wasn't the case against Thomas Almeida. He looked good in the third round. Move over to Moutinho. Southpaw, he's light on the feet. He uses lateral movement pretty well. High output. He's a pressure striker, constantly putting things in your face. Though he does lack power, he's not a big, doesn't crack guy. He telegraphs his shots a little bit. He also just charges forward without really setups. A lot of kicks. Will throw some high kicks, but has some big defensive holes. Chin high in the air. Lacks head movement a little bit. Sometimes a stationary target where he's always on the center line. In the clinch, he's not a big guy, as you said. Like he looks like he could probably be a flyweight. He does frame well. I'll give him that. Like he does good to frame in the clinch and land close elbows. He has a little bit of a junkyard dog. Like he's mean. Like I'll give him that. He's got like a mean streak in him. But as far as wrestling, entries are weak. Weak defensive wrestler. You go back to the Tony Gravely fight in CS. Like it was a title fight that I was there in attendance. Gravely was tournaments with takedown dummy. He's an okay grappler. Like he can get some submissions, and he got a submission in his last fight. And what was it? CFFC I think was his last fight. Yep. But he'll lose position and scrambles. As far as the prediction go, I think O'Malley's special. I've always been on the O'Malley bandwagon since I seen him in the LFA before he was in the Contender Series. He's only 26, as you mentioned. I think he fights for the title one day. Like I really think he's that special. Louis Smolka, like I know you said that was a good test for him. Louis Smolka was going to get smoked, in my opinion. As far as Moutinho, New England is excited for him to be in the UFC. Like all the New England media, the New England, I got a lot of friends and social media and stuff that's obviously from New England who follows MMA. They're really excited for him to be in the UFC, extremely excited for him to be on a major card on the pay-per-view. However, there's levels to this. And I'm going to get hate from my friends, and a lot of the people from New England will blindly pick Moutinho. I won't do that. O'Malley is light years ahead of him. Like light years. I don't think Moutinho's UFC level, and I think O'Malley fights for a title one night. That's like the difference in gap between these two. O'Malley plays with his food for a little bit, and you're talking about how big the gap is. I don't think the gap's big enough in the odds. Like I would have O'Malley like negative 1,000. I think he should be one of the biggest favorites in the history of the UFC. Like I said, I think he plays with his food a little bit, and then knocks out Moutinho in the first round. Same thing. I think it's gonna be spectacular. I think it's gonna be a bad one. And then Twitter's blowing up with guys like Brian Kelleher and Ricky Simone and all these people saying he didn't fight anybody. But give me O'Malley by first round knockout.
The UFC 264 main card powers on with a bantamweight matchup between Irene Aldana and Yana Kunitskaya. Aldana, the 33-year-old Mexican, is 12-6 overall. She's 5-4 in the UFC. She fought most recently last October in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 16, where she lost a pretty lopsided unanimous decision to Holly Holm. That snapped a 2-fight winning streak for her over Caitlin Vieira and Vanessa Mello. She will be taking on Kunitskaya, the woman who goes by Foxy. Do I still call her that? Like, I don't want Thiago Santos to like come to my house and kick my ass. Like, Ms. Kunitskaya, the 31-year-old Russian by way of Florida, is 14-5 with 1 no contest overall. She's 4-2 since joining the UFC. She is on a 2-fight winning streak. Most recently defeated Caitlin Vieira by unanimous decision at UFC Fight Night Blades versus Lewis in February. Took a unanimous decision also over Julia Stolyarenko last August at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Olenek. Odds here, very close to a pick'em, but Aldana is just the very slight favorite at -120, where you can actually still get Kunitskaya at even money plus 100. Keith, who do you like in this one? And I mean, this far up on the card, I'll ask. I mean, not that we'd favor either of them over Amanda Nunes, but how close is the winner of this to a title shot? Like, she's getting close to clearing out this division. So
yeah, Aldana might fall into a title shot if she wins. She lost her last fight, so she'd been on 1-fight winning streak. But it's just a matter of Amanda Nunes beating everybody. She probably didn't deserve it. She would fall into it. But Yanni Kunitskaya, on the other hand, would be on a nice little run to the UFC and well would deserve a shot. And I think that's what they might be setting up here, being that this is, one on a UFC pay-per-view, on a Conor McGregor pay-per-view, and there's some big-name people, like the entertaining fights, like Michel Pereira versus Niko Price could easily be on a pay-per-view, and it's not. So credit them for, going by the rankings. So Aldana is she's a boxer. She's a high guard defense, straight punches, accurate punches down the pipe, marches down her opponent. She makes some mistakes. Like, I don't think she's got some good boxing skills, but she needs a lot of improvement on her footwork. She kind of just follows her opponent. Her last fight against Holly Holm was a perfect example. She wasn't cutting off the cage. Huge issue against Holly Holm. Was struggling to catch up with her. She has good power, though. Her left hook being her best blow, but she can throw single strikes at a time. She has those long legs, and she does use them to throw a lot of kicks, but a lot of defensive holes in her game. Backs on the center line, lacks head movement. The commentary team kept talking about how strong her takedown defense was, though Holly Holm took her down a lot in that fight. She struggled to get off the bottom. Holly Holm, who's a decorated kickboxer, very underrated grappler, but not known for her grappling, mounted her. Aldana does have 3 submission wins, but was no match for Holly Holm on the ground. Move over to Kunitskaya. Kunitskaya, she's big for the weight class. Been former featherweight, just long. High volume striker, fights behind a high guard, long range strikes, likes to outfight from range, likes a spinning back fist, and then throws a lot of kicks. But what she does is she follows her kicks into her range. So her kick she almost uses as a jab. So she'll throw a kick, get to the mid range where she likes to look for slicing elbows. She doesn't like being pressured. Marion Renaud had a pretty good success by backing her up with pressure. Aspen Ladd put her down after putting her on her back foot. But if she can follow her kick into the clinch, that's her safe space. Like, she does very well. She's very physically strong. She'll just basically pick up her opponent, move her to the fence. Stoliarenko was someone who's known for her clinch game, and Yana Kunitskaya just muscled her and beat her up in the clinch, grind her against the fence, throwing hard knees to the body, knees to the legs, just kind of being mean in there. She's got some solid takedown defense. She got a good whizzer game. If you get on her hips, she got good hip control. If she's on top, solid top control. But she struggles on her back. Like, Aspen Ladd put her on her back, and she really struggled against Aspen on the back. But her cardio is good. She's got good output and she sustains a flow fight. So who am I picking? I'm taking Kunitskaya. I'm taking her in a slight upset. I thought Aldana looked really bad in her last fight. Like it wasn't just like, oh, Holly Holm beat her, and Holly Holm is a very good fighter, and Holly Holm is probably the second best 135er in the world, or third maybe Jermaine Durrami. But you know, like not just, oh, Holly Holm was better. Like there was some major holes in her game. And I like Kunitskaya's output. I like Kunitskaya's game plan. Like she knows what she has to do to win, and she sticks to it. Similar to what we've talked about, like a guy like Bilal Muhammad, who's been able to like get everything out of his game. Something like Lauren Murphy's, like someone who's been able to get everything out of their limited athleticism or just the physical tools they have. They learn how to get everything out of it. That's kind of where Kunitskaya is right now. And I was not that high on Kunitskaya. Like I'm very impressed with her every fight moving forward. Like she looks like she's improving. I think she's going to throw one. I think she could just win with output on the feet, but more likely, I think she's going to throw a lot of kicks, follow those kicks into the clinch, and just muscle Aldana. And there's one time Aldana won't be the bigger fighter. Also, I think she gets a couple of clinch takedowns, and I think Kunitskaya wins a decision. And honestly, I think I'll be calling for a title shot for her.
You just stole every point I wanted to make. Just every single one. Because, yeah, this is a matchup between a woman in Kunitskaya who she's overproduced compared to what I expected when she entered the UFC, against someone in Aldana who has, I mean, I wouldn't say she's disappointed, because, I mean, again, she might be a win away from a title shot here, but a little of the shine is off for me as well. And for the same reason you said, like, Holly Holm beats a lot of people. She beats everybody not named Nunes or Durandamy, but the way she beat her, you're right. It exposed problems. It exposed flaws that you would hope Aldana would have addressed, at this point, 10 fights into her UFC career. I don't know this for a fact, but just the way the timing lines up, it seems like the move to ATT has just been magic for Yana Kunitskaya. I mean, one, it introduced her to her husband, and I think father of their kid at this point. But also, yeah, like she has just become a better trained fighter. She's gotten physically stronger, even though she's dropped in weight. You can tell she looks physically more muscular. She is bullying people, and yeah, I'm with you. I think she's going to push Aldana around. I think most of this fight is going to take place in Kunitskaya's happy zone, the clinch, where she's just going to grab hold of her, because Aldana, like you said, she's a good boxer. Like I think her hands are nice and sharp. She throws combinations. Like she has all the strikes from a boxing angle, but her footwork is poor. And if your footwork is poor, well, one, it's tough on offense. Someone with better footwork can just keep away from you, but also it is tough to keep from being pushed back to the fence yourself if your opponent really wants to do it and they're strong and athletic enough. That is certainly Kunitskaya. So give me Kunitskaya by decision as well. And just for lack of another viable contender in the time frame type thing, I think this might be a title eliminator for her. And they gotta have mercy on her soul, but we'd be saying that about anyone at 135. So yeah, I'm with you. Kunitskaya by decision. Third from the top at the UFC 264 pay-per-view main card, it is a heavyweight clash between Tai Bam Bam Tuivasa and Greg, the Prince of War Hardy. Tuivasa, the 28-year-old Australian, is 11-3 overall. He is 5-3 in the UFC since joining all the way back in 2017. He's currently on a 2-fight winning streak. He fought back in March at UFC on ESPN, Brunson versus Holland, knocking out Harry Hunsucker in under a minute. Before that, he knocked Stefan Struve back into retirement in the first round of their fight at UFC 254 in October. That put an end to a 3-fight losing streak for him, in which he had lost to Sergey Spivak, Blagoy Ivanov, and Junior Dos Santos. He'll be taking on Hardy. The 32-year-old Tennessee native by way of Florida is 7-3 with 1 no contest overall. He is 4-3 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC basically out of a couple of appearances on Dana White's Contender Series and a developmental contract. At any rate, he is coming off a loss to Marcin Tybura last December at UFC Fight Night Thompson versus Neal, where he was pounded out on the ground late in the second round. That ended a modest 2-fight win streak for the former NFL star, in which he had beaten Maurice Green and Jorgen De Castro in 2020. Hardy is the slight underdog here. He's available at plus 110. Tuivasa is out there at minus 130 or so. I'll stop short of saying that Greg Hardy has stagnated and he's not getting better at all. He is getting better at the things he was already okay at, and the things he was not good at, if anything, seem to have gotten worse. He came into the UFC, pardon me. I just dropped a 32-ounce cup of water. Hardy, when he came to the UFC through the Contender Series, was a slugger. He was a knockout artist. He threw mostly kind of big, wild hooks and overhands and, the occasional big kick. He's become a decent technical kickboxer by heavyweight standards. Like, I'm putting a pretty modest level on that, but hell, I think he throws a wider variety of strikes more cleanly and sets them up better than Brock Lesnar ever did. And Brock Lesnar won a UFC title. He's become at least an average striker technically by heavyweight standards, but then that is backed up by more raw physical strength and more speed and coordination than almost every UFC heavyweight. It's a deadly combination. The things he's not good at haven't gotten better. His gas tank was suspect when he got to the UFC. He got his UFC debut. He got disqualified for an illegal knee against Alan Crowder after busting him up for the first round. There are people who speculate that he might have thrown the illegal knee on purpose because he was gassing out so badly and he preferred that over a clean loss. I won't speculate about his motivations or his decision-making process, but I will say that I thought Crowder was going to win that fight anyway, just because Hardy was getting so tired. That's not gotten better. His gas tank is not good. And when he's facing a Jorgen De Castro, who, just lets up on the gas and lets him determine the pace, he has enough gas to, win the second and third round. But Marcin Tybura completely exposed him. And his ground game is maybe the worst in the UFC, period. Any weight class, any fighter, any gender, just like he might have the worst defensive ground game in the UFC. I believe the Sherdog play-by-play at the Tybura fight, shout out to Jay Petrie, described him as like a turtle that had been flipped over onto his back. Like, that's how much of a clue as he appeared to have of what to do. That's not gotten better. So Greg Hardy, he's 10 fights into his mixed martial arts career. He has more fights than Ciryl Gane. He's 11 fights into his UFC career. So the developing prospect tag, we're kind of past that. He's 32 years old. He has 11 fights. So yeah, he's older than Ciryl Gane and has more fights than him. Greg Hardy is what he is right now. The question is whether Tuivasa has what it takes to exploit his weaknesses. Tuivasa is capable of taking a huge shot, and if he wins this fight, he'll probably have to. Obviously, Tuivasa isn't a former NFL All-Pro, but he apparently was a good Australian rules football player. He has that Polynesian deceptively athletic thing where, you look at him and he's got the basic Mark Hunt body. Or, he's taller than Mark Hunt, but he got a little bit of a tire, a little bit of a belly, but then you watch him fight and he's fast, he's coordinated, he's light on his feet. His gas tank is acceptable by heavyweight standards. Like, I expect him to have the cardio advantage over Hardy. If this fight goes past the first round, I've got Tuivasa big. Just my question is, Tuivasa, like after I just gave a really mixed kind of report on Hardy's development in his MMA career, Tuivasa hasn't developed either. In fact, you can argue that Tuivasa has developed less than Hardy. I remember after the Ivanov fight, I was on a podcast with Blaine Henry of the Fight Library, and one of the panel questions was just literally, do you think Tai Tuivasa trains? Like, just period, full stop. That was the question. Like, not do you think he trains jiu-jitsu or do you think he trains this? Just do you think he trains? Because he just still looked like a big football player just walking in to brawl and drink beer out of his shoe. There's just nothing I saw in the Hunsucker and Struve fights that makes me think that he's got anything for Hardy. Like, Hardy's the slight underdog here. Like I say, if this goes past the first round, this is Tuivasa by whatever he wants, I think. But I don't think it gets to the second round. I think Hardy's just going to come out. His advantages in reach, his better striking is going to tell. It's going to tell quickly. He's going to light him up with a bunch of punches early on, drop him and finish him. Give me Greg Hardy by first round knockout, and it'll be probably the most impressive performance of his career to date.
Wow. So, I love that. Do you think Tai Tuivasa trains? So yeah. So I thought you hit this one on the head. Great. Like, especially the breakdown of Greg Hardy. Like, you said that he has improved what he was already good at. I agree. Like, he's an elite athlete. He's a massive dude. I covered his fight when he was in Boston. He's an imposing figure when he walks in the room. He's just yeah. He's bigger than every single. He's got these other guys who look like walk around and look like they're football players, and he was still bigger than all of them. Explosive, obviously, crushing power. I thought he did better against Volkov than he gets credited for, especially in his young career. I agree with what you're saying. He's not a prospect anymore, but he's still he's learning on the job still. Decent feints. He uses feints well. Decent head movement. He better improve his head movement even more because he drops his hands. That's a big issue there with him. He keeps his chin high in the air. He's developing a jab. He throws hard kicks to the legs, hard kicks to the body. He does move straight back on the center line. I say he's got a good chin. Like, we haven't seen him hurt on the feet yet in his career. Though Volkov did hurt him to the body. He's so physically strong. He can just throw guys. He just threw Juan Adams. He did show okay ground control. I would say I don't think he's terrible on the ground on top. Like, he showed some skills on top and more his green. Like, his ground and pound. But if he's on his back, I think he's terrible. He has not showed enough. And it's I don't think he's not working on it. I think just there's some skills you're just not good at, and that's one of them with Greg Hardy. Tuivasa is only 28. I like that he's only 28. I think he's got good hand speed, though he wings shots. He throws hard. I would say he has plus power. Not for a heavyweight. Obviously, he has crushing power. If he hit anybody, but for a heavyweight, I'd say he has plus power. Hard calf kicks. I know he's been focusing on his wrestling. They say that he's went to AKA and was working on his wrestling. He did stop some takedown attempts from Stefan Struve, who's not really known for his wrestling either. Though I wouldn't say I'm confident in his wrestling. I mean, this guy Sergey Spivak headlocked him, so that makes you know how I feel about his wrestling. He also struggled greatly if he was taken out. They're both really bad on the back. This is a fight that I have no confidence in. Pre-tape study, I was going with Greg Hardy. Then tape study, I went with Tai Tuivasa. Then you started talking and you made some good points. Makes me want to jump back to Greg Hardy. I think Tuivasa has the faster hands, but I think length would be a little bit of an issue. I think movement would be a little bit of an issue. I think those 2 points you made well. I think Tuivasa will do best if he gets to the clinch and kind of tries get an up close battle. I don't know if he will do that. So I wrote Tuivasa by second round to TKO. That's what I wrote down because I was thinking Hardy slows down and Tuivasa catches him with something. And I was gonna say like we've never seen Hardy get hurt on the feet. This is the guy that can crack him. But you know what, man? I think you talked me into Greg Hardy. So I'm gonna switch my pick and I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna say Greg Hardy wins. I don't want to. I don't think he gets him out of the. You know what? Screw it. I'll say he gets him out of the first round too. I say he gets him on. I say somehow he gets on top and he lands some hard ground and pound, and gets a stoppage where he's just like clubbing big Greg Hardy hands. Give me Greg Hardy, but also by first round knockout.
Oh, man, all right. Me convincing someone of good things about Greg Hardy is not the highlight of my week, but we will move on. With that, we come to the co-main event, a extremely high stakes welterweight matchup between two former title challengers in Gilbert Burns and Stephen Thompson. Burns, the 34-year-old Brazilian, is 19-4 overall. He's 12-4 in the UFC. He fought most recently in February, his unsuccessful shot at the title held by Kamaru Usman, who knocked him out early in the third round. That snapped a 6-fight winning streak for Burns. He had most recently beaten former champ Tyron Woodley and longtime top contender in multiple divisions, Damian Maia, which punched his ticket to that title shot. He'll be taking on Thompson. The 38-year-old from South Carolina is 16-4-1 overall. He's 11-4-1 in the UFC. He's currently on a 2-fight winning streak, having taken a unanimous decision over Jeff Neal in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 183 last December. And before that, took a unanimous decision over Vicente Luque at UFC 244 all the way back in November of 2019. Odds in this one do slightly favor Wonderboy. He is minus 155. You can get Burns around plus 135 as the underdog. I'm going to kick this one to you first anyway, Keith, but first a question. What's at stake here? Is this a likely title eliminator? Like, even if they have to wait, until Colby Covington and Leon Edwards sort it out, does the winner of this at least get to sit and wait for the next title shot?
I don't think it's gonna, especially if it's Gilbert Burns, being that he just fought the champion. Obviously, if Kamaru Usman loses the title, that changes things for Gilbert Burns. But if assuming Kamaru Usman holds on to the title, it's a long road. You figure the title fight between him and Colby Covington, we expect to be next. That hasn't been announced for a date yet. Leon Edwards, you assume, is after that. So, say, excuse me, say they fight in October, Covington. You figure you got a turnaround, earliest February, March, earliest, and then another turnaround that you're talking about summertime next year. I mean, you go want to sit on the sidelines for a year. I don't think so. And then in Gilbert Burns' case, you might not get it. Stephen Thompson, it makes a lot more sense. You got the whole argument with everyone's faced Usman, but Thompson. That's a strong argument. He did be on a nice run. So yeah, I'm assuming you want me to go into the fight because the fight is
Please.
This is one of the most spectacular. It's funny that they keep talking about it as grappler versus striker, karate versus jiu-jitsu. I watch like the Countdown show and the embeddeds and all that stuff. And it's so much more than that. One Burns is not just a grappler, first of all. I mean, he almost knocked out Kamaru Usman in his last for the title. So he's more than just a grappler. But while Stephen Thompson, we've really never seen much grappling from him. What he's been able to do in the sport, like I wouldn't just call him just like a one-dimensional striker. Like you can't be at this point. So, I mean, we've seen him more defensive grappling than offensive grappling. Now, who's going to win? God, this is such a fun fight. This is one of the I've kind of flip-flopped. Stephen Thompson's one of the best strikers in MMA history. Just plain and simple. He's so athletic. He's elusive. He's so fluid. He just flows. One of the guys he just flows. Stances he switches stances constantly. He's one of the best. He can, like, is he a southpaw? Is he orthodox? Like, what stance is he better? And he's great at both of them. Amazing movement. He keeps his hands low, but he almost does. He keeps his hands low to bait you at him, to bait you to throw at his face, because his head movement is so great, but also his lateral movement, the way he'll get you to throw, and then he'll laterally move and cut an angle. So now, not only is he striking off your counter, but he's striking from a different angle. So when you come in, you have to kind of come in and then turn again, which is so, awkward when you try to blitz somebody. He's very good. Speaking about his movement, he's very good at having you chase him with his movement, then suddenly stopping on a dime and landing a shot on you while you're still moving forward. Something that Joanna Jędrzejczyk was really good at doing. Stephen Thompson probably the best at it. But he's not just a counter striker, because he can just blitz in with a combination himself, and then his combination, he'll add a high kick at the end of it. So it's like he'll throw a 3-4 punch combination and then like hook kick around your head. He has that bladed karate stance, so he makes himself a very small target. But he's got fast hands, fast kicks. As mentioned, great counter striking. He has a lot of variety in his strikes. He can work from the outside, piece you up with a jab. That's what he did to Jorge Masvidal. That's what he did to Vicente Luque in their fight. He's got the hook kicks. He's got the side kicks. Some negatives. There is some negatives about him. One is he has been trigger shy in the past, which is so amazing when you think about a guy like Stephen Thompson, so was so good at striking that he's been tentative. I think about the second fight against Tyron Woodley was one of them. The Darren Till fight was another one where he just simply didn't pull the trigger enough. He is open to leg kicks due to his big base, the big karate stance. He lacks one punch power. Like, you don't see Stephen Thompson putting it out with one strike. And I think he lacks a killer instinct. And I think that comes from the karate background, because in karate, it's point. Like, you hit someone, you don't go in and follow up to put them out. It's more like you get a point. All right, now it's 3-1. Whatever. I don't really know how those scoring section, but it's like, we've seen Karate Kid. It's like that. Like, they stop, you land one strike, you reset. He's a guy that'll hurt you, and he'll reset himself instead of going in and putting you off. And also, I'm a little worried about his chin. I mean, you think about the fight against Tyron Woodley, he was dropped. Darren Till dropped him. It probably cost him the fight. Anthony Pettis knocked him out. So those are things that are concerning. And he's up there in age. He's 38, I think.
38, yeah.
Now move over to Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is fast, tight boxing, tight combos. Hands are coming straight down the middle, down the pipe. He hits hard. He almost knocked out Kamaru Usman. His left hook knocked out Damian Maia. Thudding leg kicks. He has some whole, he doesn't like being pressured. He didn't like the pressure for Kamaru Usman. He didn't like the pressure for Konchenko when Konchenko actually got a late surge on him. He also, I'm surprised that he can get backed up for the fence. Like, he was backed up the fence against Damian Maia, even though he knocked out Damian Maia. Nobody remembers that part. He remembers Damian Maia was actually doing somewhat well early in that fight. It's actually why I picked Damian Maia to beat Belal Muhammad, based on how well he was doing against Gilbert Burns. He also struggled with the jab of Usman. That's what took over that fight. I'm a little worried about his chin now that he's got knocked out in his last fight. He's strong, dirty boxer. Like, he gets you in the clinch, he beats you up. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's an elite grappler. This is a 3-time world champion in BJJ. He's very active in BJJ tournaments and super fights and grappling whoever, he's good takedowns, good entries, quick level at chains. He's not a guy that needs to pull guard. Like, he can shoot on your hips, slam you. He did it to Tyron Woodley with a nice power double. He also got some body lock takedowns. He has good hip control, so he wins scrambles. He can judo throw you. He did it to Gunnar Nelson. And he's got some slick back takes. Like, he can take you back, great top control. And he will pull guard if he has to, but that's not really his game. So, who wins? Well, first thing I'll say is Thompson's 38. So everything I said good about him could easily fall apart without us even knowing. Like, all these things about being elusive, like, all that could be gone tonight. We don't even know it. And that's kind of what happens when you're 38. This is another fight that's really hard to pick. Like, you could convince me otherwise. I think Burns has more avenues for victory than Thompson. He has power in his hand, so he could catch Thompson and knock him out, but he could also just close the distance and submit him. I mean, this is, like I said, this is a multi-time world champion. However, I seen Usman jab up Burns in his last fight. And Thompson has one of the best jabs in the game. I think Burns struggles to trap Thompson due to his movement. I know he brought in Raymond Daniels, the guy fighting in Bellator. I think that was a great move. Someone similar to Stephen Thompson. If you had to learn anything from anybody, that's probably a good guy. I definitely feel more confident now that he brought someone like that in. But I don't think you get that, how to trap somebody with a 8-week camp. I think that takes 8 months to really pick up on it, especially someone like Stephen Thompson. You've been doing it for 4 months. He's been doing it for almost 40 years. The other thing, when you really dig into Gilbert Burns' record, it hasn't aged well. When you look at the guys that he beat to get himself the titles, Konchenko lost. I mean, Konchenko win doesn't look that good anymore. Damon Maia win doesn't look that good anymore. Tyron Woodley might get knocked out by a YouTube star. I don't know. I hope he doesn't. But I don't know which one of these you fight in. Jake, Logan, one of them. But I don't follow, guys. I follow me. I don't follow that stuff at all. I still don't even know what they're famous for. But that hasn't aged well, So I started asking myself, like how good is Gilbert Burns? Like, I've seen him knocked out by Dan Hooker. This was a B-level fighter for a long time, and he won a nice run. But then I'm like, who's he beaten? Like, has he beaten anybody really good during this run? I mean, but then I think about the Usman fight. I'm like, no, he didn't beat Usman, but he almost knocked him out. So that actually makes me feel good. So I'm not dogging Gilbert Burns by any means. Like, I do think Gilbert Burns is elite. I really do. I really think he's a top 5 welterweight. I think he is going to give Stephen Thompson a good fight. I think he'd give Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal, and it was like I would feel very confident in him in a lot of those matchups. But I still have that little bit of question, like maybe he's not. So this is a really fun fight. When they were first announced, I was going with Gilbert Burns, and then I changed my mind, and I was taking Stephen Thompson. I'm still not the confident, but I think Stephen Thompson uses his movement. I think he outpoints him from the distance. Stays relevant in the division, and not just relevant, but he's got people calling for him to get a title shot next. So give me Stephen Thompson by I'm gonna say by unanimous decision.
Yeah, I keep going back to Thompson's win over Jeff Neal back in December. Now, only time will tell how much of that is due to Neal just really being compromised by the health issues he had earlier in 2020. Like, we may not know for another year. For all we know, Jeff Neal might be out of the sport entirely, or he might be on another 3-fight winning streak and in the title picture. We have no idea. But what I saw was Stephen Thompson basically go untouched by one of the better boxers in the division. Like, Neal could not lay a finger on him. And it was much the same with Luque a year before that. There's always the question, like you said, when you've got a guy who's pushing 40, and while his style, it's not predicated on speed, it certainly doesn't hurt that he has speed, and it's definitely predicated on movement. There's every chance that this is the time it goes off a cliff. But I think Burns' best route to victory here, short of catching him with something huge and knocking him out. I mean, obviously that's anyone's best route to victory if you can do it. But and I sure hope he didn't watch the Anthony Pettis fight with Thompson and go, man, I should just do that. That looks a lot easier than like what Woodley had to do. You know what I mean? Because until I see it again, I'm not convinced that that's not just an aberration. We can already tell it's going to probably go down as the last great win of Pettis' career. But it may also just go down, hey, remember that one time Stephen Thompson like really, got caught and just flatlined? I hope Burns isn't going to try to duplicate that, because I think his best route to victory is to really, really like come at Thompson, try to crowd him, come in behind punches, and just really, really try to get the takedown. Even if he doesn't get it, or even if he doesn't get it until later in the fight, that's a route to winning rounds against Thompson, by at least looking like the aggressor and not just letting him snipe you with kicks and jabs at range. Otherwise, you're so right. His jab is amazing, and it's amazing because it's almost like he took one tool out of like the regular MMA kickboxer's tool chest and then just made it work seamlessly. Because other karate guys don't have a jab like that. Lyoto Machida never had a jab like that. Like none of your Burns fought Gunnar Nelson a couple years ago. Nelson obviously is a ground whiz, but on the feet, he's very much a karate fighter. None of the other karate guys have that jab. And then there's the kicks. The kicks don't have instant knockout power unless you're Jake Ellenberger. But he doesn't telegraph him at all. Like he just has like his legs are more coordinated than my arms. Yeah, like Burns' best route to victory, I think, is to just really turn into, grappling centric Burns and try to sell out to get this thing to the ground. Otherwise, it's just going to be Thompson fighting his fight against Burns. And even at 38, I don't see anybody outstriking like Thompson. Not in this division. Not right now. Give me Thompson by decision as well. And I think the UFC will kind of flirt with the idea of like floating him towards the top. He's a charismatic guy. He has a lot of appeal. The UFC embedded ones for Thompson events are almost the only ones I watch. I have to post them for sure, dog. But if Thompson's in them, I like actually watch because I like to see him just like driving the church bus around his little town in South Carolina and just like teaching 3-year-olds like karate and just being clearly the nicest dude on the planet. So that's always fun.
I'm older than Stephen Thompson, and he's like a role model for me. Like I look up to him.
I completely
get it.
Good person. Yes. But yeah, like give me Stephen Thompson. This might at least put him into, hey, stay close to weight because you're on deck if anyone falls through on any of these next, like the Covington fight, or if they make an Edwards fight. They'll probably make him fight Edwards just to make Edwards have to jump through one more hoop.
Could you imagine? Sorry to interrupt you. Could you imagine? No. Say somehow Leon Edwards skips Kobe Covington, which I'm okay with that. Could you imagine if they booked Covington versus Stephen Thompson? Like not the fight, but I mean the fight would be fantastic. But I mean the build up to the fight.
The build up to the fight would be interesting. Like I wonder if
I just don't do it. Like I don't want to see Kobe Covington talking trash to Stephen Thompson. Like
neither do I. Maybe he wouldn't. Like maybe he just wouldn't be able to bring himself to like be an asshole to Stephen Thompson. Kind of like when Chael Sonnen fought Brian Stan, and he's like, Brian Stan's like a decorated war vet. Like, what can I say? Like give me more Brazilian guys to drink their own pee.
Yeah. Why don't you win more medals?
Yeah. See, Covington might actually say that. Anyway, anything else on this fantastic co-main event before we move on?
No, I'm excited for it, and it seems like that it seems like the winner of this is they're gonna poor Leon Edwards is gonna have to fight.
12 fights down. We now get to talk about the main event of UFC 264. It is a lightweight matchup between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. Poirier, the 32-year-old Louisiana native, is 27-6 with 1 no contest. He is 19-5 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He fought most recently, of course, back in January, knocking out McGregor in the second round of the headliner at UFC 257. Prior to that, he took a unanimous decision over Dan Hooker in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 12 last June. And before that, he was choked out in the third round by Khabib Nurmagomedov in the headliner of UFC 242, in which Nurmagomedov unified his lineal title with Poirier's interim title. He'll be facing McGregor. The 32-year-old Irishman is 22-5 overall. He's 10-3 since joining the UFC as a former Cage Warriors 2-division champ. He, of course, duplicated that feat in the UFC, but most recently, prior to the loss to Poirier, he knocked out Donald Cerrone inside of a minute at UFC 246 last January, rocked him with shoulder strikes against the cage, head kicked him, and finished the job with punches. It was a sensational bursting back onto the scene after his loss to Nurmagomedov, where he tapped to a hybrid face crank, neck crank, rear naked choke attempt in the fourth round of the headliner of UFC 229 back in October of 2018. Odds on this one are close to a pick'em. Right now, Poirier minus 130, McGregor available at plus 110. 90% of McGregor's fights have swung in his direction during fight week. So by the time you're listening to this, or certainly by the time they enter the cage, this might be a pick'em, or McGregor might even be the favorite despite having lost to this man 6 months ago. I talked about it a little bit off the top of the show, just what's at stake here, how big this card feels for a card without a belt, explicitly on the line or even an absolutely promised title shot. It just feels big. Conor McGregor fights always feel big. The cards feel big. There's nothing else going on in the MMA world, basically. In my column this week, I did list McGregor as one of the people who is facing elevated levels of risk and reward versus the person he's fighting. It's more than just the W's and L's for them. Obviously, when you have a trilogy between two high-level fighters, between two championship-level fighters, that rubber match, it can be a career-defining moment. It defines the whole narrative of their, it defines the whole narrative of their place in their era, their place on the mythical all-time list that we love to argue about. That's at stake. There's also a lot more at stake for them right now, I think. In the last 5 years, and since June of 2016, McGregor has fought in MMA 5 times. So 5 times in 5 years. Poirier's fought 11 times in that same time span. Obviously, in the wake of their fight 6 months ago, that kind of showed, as McGregor was just flat out like, I wasn't prepared for the low kicks. Well, yeah, because you haven't been fighting in the last 2 or 3 years, except against Nurmagomedov, who doesn't kick. If Poirier loses, I fully expect that he will dust himself off, rub some dirt on it, and go down the ladder a bit, fight a rising top 10 guy, and make his way back up. If Poirier loses, I still fully expect that he will challenge again for a UFC title and perhaps win it at some point in his career before it's all done. On the other hand, if McGregor loses, I think that's it. I think that's the end of the conversation about Conor McGregor as a championship level fighter. There will be money fights left. Nate Diaz is still waiting there. And obviously, he could go milk some more millions out of the celebrity boxing spectacle thing before, that fad passes. In fact, he's kind of uniquely positioned for that because depending on who he fights, he can either be the celebrity or the real boxer. If he wants to go box Jake Paul, he's the real boxer. I mean, I know Jake Paul actually has been training boxing, but McGregor's like the real combat athlete. If he wants to go over there and box, I mean, who would be a good one? Well, hell, I like an Oscar De La Hoya type that they're talking about having fight like Vitor Belfort and shit. Then all of a sudden, he's kind of the spectacle celebrity. But in terms of being in the UFC title picture, I think this is it. I think this is McGregor's last stand. And I think that matters to him. I don't like psychoanalyzing fighters. I think it's ridiculous. But I am willing to draw conclusions based on their actions and their choices. And beneath all the money and the fame and all the other kind of bullshit and misbehavior, McGregor is a deeply competitive guy who really does care about his own greatness. He cares about it internally and he cares about the external validation of legacy. If all he cared about was money, he would have fought Diaz back in January, or he'd be fighting Diaz this weekend. If all he cared about was money, he'd be fighting Nate Diaz this weekend. It would make him just as much money as the Poirier fight, and there'd be less chance of him getting his block knocked off. Like, whatever you could say about Conor McGregor, the guy is a big game hunter. I mean, he's literally fought the best boxer and the best mixed martial artist of his generation, like within a reasonable spitting distance of his weight range. Like, he's fought the best boxer and the best mixed martial artist that he could have.
That's a good point.
Like, he went 0-2, but you can't say the guy didn't dare to be great. And because of that, he cares about this. He does not want to go down 2-1 to a guy that he embarrassed the first time they fought. He does not want to be outside of the UFC title discussion. Like, he only wants to fight once per year, but he wants to be able to tweet every time there's a high-level lightweight fight in the UFC and everybody cares about it. You know, he wants to be looming over this division, and this is his last chance. Because if he loses to Poirier, do you think Conor McGregor is going to come back 6 months from now and like fight Beneil Dariush in a co-main event?
No.
No.
Yeah.
So this is it. Beat Poirier, and we'll talk about this after we make our picks, but beat Poirier, you've probably got a title shot next. You leapfrog everybody, and you're fighting Charles Oliveira next. If you lose, it's money fights and, you know, count your stacks. I mean, any thoughts on that? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, man, you covered a lot of what I want to talk about, and I agree.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
I agree with everything you said. There's not a single thing I disagree with. Like, you were dead on. One thing, back up, when Conor chose Poirier, when he beat down Cerrone and he got Poirier, like, he could have pressed for a title fight. He probably would have got a title fight. He could have, he chose to go Poirier. He didn't go with Diaz, which probably would have made him even more money. He took a chance. Like, why give Poirier the shot? You got the win over him. You took a chance. Now you're doing it again. Like, you're taking a second chance that you could fall down, 1-2. And you're on the right side of the trilogy. And everyone, I think about Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. Mm-hmm. Ali's 2-1 against Joe Frazier.
Yep.
Would Ali be the star he is all these years later if he lost to Thriller to Miller? Probably not.
Probably not.
I'm not saying that Joe Frazier would have been Muhammad Ali, but Ali wouldn't have been that mega icon. 40 years later, how many years later that talking about him as greatest boxer, greatest whatever, big, at least the best showman or whatnot. And I feel like I agree with you. Like, will Conor be the biggest star in UFC history still? Yeah, he will. But things change, and honestly, if he beats Poirier, it creates his legacy even better, because now he's got the lead on Poirier. He won the trilogy. It'll go down as one of the most famous trilogies, with Brandy and Chuck Liddell and whatever you want to throw in there. Like, this will be the number one, and he won it. But if he loses, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights. You figure you throw in Floyd Mayweather, he's 1-4. I don't count the Floyd, but 1-4. And if he loses, I'm with you. Like, we forget he might never fight again. Like, this is a guy who takes off for long periods of time. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he loses and we never see Conor McGregor fight again. We see him at a UFC Hall of Fame next time, like 2 years from now or something. So the risk reward for him is so much. Like, the risk reward on him is his reward. I don't think is as big as his risk. Like, he kind of starts getting forgotten a little bit. He's out of the title picture. Yeah, the Diaz fight. He could still obviously headline a pay-per-view, but like, that's gonna get old after a while. Like, people are gonna stop, lose interest. You have to win. You you can't just keep losing. Now, we could talk about Poirier. I don't think he really cashed in on the McGregor win last time. I think he could have became a bigger star. I think he could have done more talk shows. I think he could have done more. But maybe he was waiting for to win the trilogy. So, yeah, I want to win the trilogy, then I'm going to do all that stuff. But when you think about the all-time lists, we start ranking the all-time greatest fighters. He's going to be behind Poirier if he doesn't win. Poirier's going to be ranked higher than him. So I think that's it. I think that is a really good point. And then when you really think about McGregor as a whole, you think of more of Ronda Rousey. Like, yeah, his rise was incredible. It was unbelievable. He did amazing things. He was the first double champion. He took MMA to a whole nother level, but it was a really short period of time. That's it. Like everything, beating Donald Cerrone years later, doesn't matter. It was just this 1-2 year run, whatever, 4 or 5 fight run, and that's it. And that's kind of basically what Ronda Rousey did. However, he's gambling on himself, and I agree with you talking about how competitive he is. If he can beat Poirier, he can win that trilogy. If he can starch him and then get himself a title shot and say he actually wins it, now his legacy goes he's a whole nother. Now he's a 2-time champion, and now he went through now it's no longer, remember his road up to the, flyweight title, there was some question marks. Oh, did he have the hardest road? That won't really be the case. He went through Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira, if he does. Now, I want to talk about Dustin Poirier real quick, because I know we're gonna break down the fight. But Dustin Poirier, I give him a lot of credit, because the risk reward isn't as hard on him as it was on McGregor. Like, what he's risking, like, the reward's better. Like, obviously, you're getting the big money fighting Conor. You're getting the name Conor on you. It hopefully propels you into a star. He's probably banking, like, if he beats Conor and he wins a trilogy, you can really make it all right. Like, if the UFC markets are right, you can turn Dustin Poirier into the biggest star in the UFC. Have him on the Today Show, on Monday morning, or have him on Conan and all whatever. Have him everywhere. That's make him your face, even if it's for a year. Just make him your face, and make him the good guy. Like, you can sell good guys. You can sell good guy stars. That's what he is. He can be the baby face, good guy. He can be the Hulk Hogan, whoever. But what I love about Dustin Poirier is that he bet on himself. And what I mean by that is he took Conor when he could have taken the title shot. Then he took the Conor again. He took Conor twice instead of getting the title shot. If he loses to Conor and he takes a long road back, and I think you're right, there's a chance he can come, but there's a long road back. He's up there in age. It's an unbelievable division. If Conor actually somehow won the title, you're kind of really putting yourself back, because you're down 1-2. So he bet on himself. But imagine if it works out. Imagine he gets 2 wins over Conor McGregor, then fights for the title and wins it. What a better run than that? Like, that's the best of both worlds, and it's very well possibility.
And then all of a sudden, it becomes only because of the head-to-head result that Khabib is ahead of him on the list of all-time lightweights.
That's it. But he gets a couple title shots. Who knows? But yeah. I just love that he risked his legacy of the champion to go after Conor, and it might work out for him.
Yeah,
very good chance it does.
Well, next up, I'd like you to tell me whether you think it does.
Man, I love this fight. Like, it's funny because I already thought I was so pumped, like I couldn't possibly be more pumped for this fight than I was, and then we just talked about the legacies and all that. You know how much I love that stuff. This is one of the biggest fights in UFC history. I think when we're filming this Wednesday, once we get the press conference, the weigh-ins, the buzz is going to be through the roof. I don't think it'll top the Diaz fight. I don't think it'll top Khabib, but it should. Other than Khabib, like it should. Stylistically, what's on the line? That to me, there's a lot. So Conor McGregor, I'll start with Conor because Conor's the big. You know what? Actually, no. Let me start. Let me actually lay back. I want to start with Dustin because he won. I said this last time when we were breaking down Dustin Poirier. I can't stress how big he is. When I saw him at a Bellator show, only time I ever seen him live in person, he looked like a middleweight. Like, he's a freaking big dude. And this is a former featherweight. He's southpaw, high output. What I love about him is he's constantly adding new tools to his game. Like, every fight, like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, all of a sudden, Dustin Poirier does this. Like, 2 fights ago, I was talking about his mid-stance changes, where he comes in and he changes his stance. So he come in as a southpaw attacking, and then he cuts an angle where he's orthodox to land from a different angle than he would hit before, something that Israel Adesanya constantly does, something Anderson Silva used to do. Dustin Poirier's added that. Max Holloway does it too, but like the lead of the elite strikers do it. Dustin Poirier does that. his counter right hook has become a deadly strike. He hurt Holloway with it. He hurt McGregor with it. That's something that he's added over the years. He does so well to land with power because he keeps his base. His feet is always underneath him when he throws. I talk a lot of time about arm punches. That's not the case with Poirier. Like his whole body comes into his shots. But it's weird because he just touches and still generates so much power because his base, his hips, everything's turning in sync. He's so well. His crushing body kicks, like that was another thing he added against Eddie Alvarez. He was crushing Eddie. Obviously, the last fight, the calf kicks. Suddenly he's chopping down Justin Gaethje style, kicking out Conor's. And that's actually something we talked about that could hurt Conor is the calf kicks. We didn't stress it as much as we should have, but the calf kicks on Conor. Anthony Rocco Martin told me that every single person he's ever started, nobody hits harder than Dustin Poirier. This guy, training American Top Team, training. I'm assuming he probably went in there with middleweights and he's a welterweight himself. And he says the lightweight, former featherweight, was the hardest hitter ever. Poirier is so offensive minded though that he does have some defensive flaws. We've always said that about him. Dan Hooker hurt him many times. Like early going in the Dan Hooker fight, Dan Hooker was teeing off on him. He doesn't check leg kicks himself. We talk about leg kicks. He didn't check leg kicks himself. When Conor was throwing leg kicks back at him, calf kicks back at him, he was landing them. He's not a great wrestler from distance. He's more of a wrestler from the clinch. But one thing I want to back up. One thing I do love is that he came out wrestling against McGregor in the last fight. He went for a takedown early, which to me is brilliant because why? Not that he's a good wrestler where he's going to take him down, he's going to submit him, he's not going to Habib him, but maybe he ties him out a little bit. And what's Conor's game? Conor comes out. He's a fast starter. He put how many guys he put away? He put Poirier away the first time in the first round. So why not tire him out a little bit? Get him to wrestle. Similar to what George St. Pierre did to BJ Penn in their second fight. Get the lactic acid in his arms, which takes away his striking power. To me, I think that's why Poirier went for a takedown. One, to remind him that wrestling is there, but also I feel like to kind of slow down the fast start. He has a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, obviously Habib took him down. Habib took over, but Eddie Alvarez got some takedowns on him. Not that I expect Conor to take him down, but something to do. I also hate that he makes his wrestling worse by jumping to guillotines. I've said it a million times about I hate that part of his game, but his heart is second to none. I mean, we saw it in the Max Holloway fight where he needed to dig deep late in that fight when Max Holloway was kind of having a flurry and it seemed like he was turning the tides. He dug deep. It was 2-2 with 1 round left in the fight against Dan Hooker. He dug deep and won that fight. And Conor used to win the mental game. Yeah, Poirier was very upfront about the mental game going into their first fight. But to me, Poirier wins the mental game in the fight. Like when the fight starts and it starts getting the 4th, 5th, and it starts digging deep, Poirier is not going to fold like he did before. Not mentally. He might physically fall. Just, if you batter his brain, But mentally, I think that's why we saw him at times when he landed a good shot. He pointed at Conor. His confidence was building as the fight every time he landed a shot. And I don't think that's something that Conor was able to psych people out. I mean, Jose Aldo was like how psyched out he was in their fight. That's not the case with Dustin Poirier. And with the win over Conor, it's even less. Now, move over to Conor. Though we talked about the run that McGregor could be on and that his legacy would be hurt by this and it'd be viewed in history much different, that won't take away the fact that he's one of the best strikers in UFC history. I'll just say that. He's a southpaw. He's so good at finding his range, especially early. Like he seems to, even against in the last fight against Poirier, like he was landing shots immediately. Like right away. He got to his range like 10 seconds in. He was landed a clean left hand. Like he finds his range easily. He's very precise. He has great vision. He sees everything that's coming to him. Even the calf kicks, he was catching them like he was trying to catch him even when he was hurt. He could see the kicks coming. When he avoids strikes, he keeps his eyes on his target, and he just slips, which is like something we talked about Sean O'Malley. You just slip a little bit to leave yourself in line to land. You line up your own left hand, in his case, to land crushing shots. His fadeaway left is absolutely legendary. I mean, think about the Jose Aldo. I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking, like, what was I've been watching MMA since UFC 6. That was, was it 1995, whatever. I've been watching for 25 years. So let's just say, one moment, if I have the biggest oh shit moment in 25 years, it's the one punch knockout of Jose Aldo. Like that's, if I can only think of MMA for one moment, that's the moment.
Yep.
And that's what you get with his straight left. He's one of the hardest pound for pound hitters in UFC history. And this was the guy that was a featherweight that was dropping a welterweight, Nate Diaz, with shots. I've talked about the past. He isn't just a left hand. His left hand is a moneymaker, but his right hand, he does it really well to reach and distract. He goes to the body. He went to the body a lot in the second fight against Poirier, much more than I expected. So on the feet, yeah, a lot of success. Now, obviously, in the grappling, well, actually, let me back up. So I talked about the body shots. He hurt Chad Mendes with body shots. Even Khabib, like in the third round, was actually body shots. That the one round Conor won against Khabib was body shots. I think his kicking game is a little underrated. He throws his kicks to Diaz. I think that's something he might want to come out throwing kicks at Poirier. Maybe turn the kicking game into an offense. He obviously threw that high kick against Cerrone, keep kicks against Mendes. He doesn't like being pressured. We saw that in the Diaz fights, but that's not really. Poirier is more of a similar to Jennifer Myers, more like stand your ground. He's not going to come forward, and he does drop. Conor can drop his hands at times. He actually dropped his hand with the punch that knocked him out. He dropped his hand and Poirier went over the top. But the obviously the calf kicks is a huge issue. We saw that. I was surprised when they were clinching how successful Conor was in the clinch in the second fight, and especially those shoulder strikes. That's 2 fights in a row that Conor was having success with the shoulder strikes. But Conor has almost no offensive wrestling. He gets taken down a lot. You go Chad Mendes fight, Khabib takes him down. Poirier took him down. Dennis Seaver actually briefly took him down once, going all the way back to the Dennis Seaver fight. But he's hard to hold down. I mean, even Khabib at times struggled to keep Conor down. Cardi was a big issue in the Diaz fight. I think it could be a big issue against Dustin Poirier. You're not going to match Dustin Poirier's output. And you start worrying about his chin. I mean, his chin used to be legendary, but you figure Floyd Mayweather knocked him down, Khabib dropped him, and now Poirier put him out. Like, those are 3 things recently that happened. So who wins? I did all that talking for who wins because I just love this fight. This fight is so good. I love it so much. There's a lot of question marks. Has Conor made adjustments? If he did, what were the adjustments? And then you got to ask, so even if he did make adjustments, what new wrinkle is Poirier going to add? Because he's going to add a new wrinkle. He's going to add something new, and is kind of ready for that. I rewatched that second fight. I rewatched it twice. And Conor was doing very, very well. He was doing much better than I remember. He landed 4 or 5 or 6 like hard left hands where I actually thought Poirier was hurt. And if he turned it up, he might have actually ended Poirier. Poirier admitted in the post-fight interview that Conor had him hurt, and he was surprised that Conor didn't come in for the kill. And he's talked about how hard Conor hit. We talked about the pressure. You talked about the pressure on Conor. Nobody's risen for pressure more than Conor. Like, Conor's put the pressure. I mean, think about the Jose Aldo fight and lived up to it. If anybody could come back, I mean, think about the Diaz fight. He was in a similar situation when he came back from the Diaz fight. This is my fight of the night. This is going to be a banger. This is incredibly. I thought the last fight was a banger. This is going to be a banger again. I am so torn because I'm so curious what I'm so curious of what Poirier is going to add. I have no idea what it's going to be. Like, I didn't expect him to wrestle last time. I didn't expect I did expect some calf kicks, but not to that extent. So I'm so interested in what Poirier is going to add. But I can't get back the fact that Conor was landing the left hand a lot, like at ease, and that's still going to be there. And can Poirier take it? This pick's going to make a lot of people happy, and it's going to make a lot of people pissed. But I think we're going to have an all-time war, and I think Conor's going to put him out. I picked Conor last time. I remember I picked Conor the first time they fought, and I'm picking Conor a third time. Give me Conor. I'm going to say he knocks him out, and I'm going to say he knocks him out in the second round.
Alrighty, that is one in the books for Conor McGregor to take the lead position in this trilogy and really flip an entire division on its head in a way that arguably only he can do of anybody active in the sport today. Man, I picked McGregor in their second fight. Even though I thought Poirier had made vast improvements since their first fight, even though I thought the move to lightweight favored Poirier over McGregor. They both had a hard cut to featherweight. Poirier's was harder. Like moving up to lightweight permanently, just his game has blossomed. He has more confidence in his cardio. His output's gone up. His power has at least carried over, if not improved. But despite all that, I picked McGregor because despite all the improvements Poirier has made, he's still hittable. He's still hittable early. And McGregor is one of the fastest starters in the sport's history. And he's not a fast starter in the sense of just running at you like a wild man like Michel Pereira. Just it takes him almost no time to get the range, get the rhythm, and start. He's hitting the other guy with nasty stuff while the other guy is still trying to get his feet wet. I thought that was going to happen again. I was wrong. And I felt pretty good about the pick for a minute. As you said, going back and rewatching this, McGregor did so much better than I remembered like a week after the fight. You know, it's interesting how the narrative just like your head starts to draw a straight line from the beginning to the end of what happened, and it kind of misses the detours. Because, yeah, 60 seconds into the fight, I was like, okay, yeah, this is playing out just like I thought. McGregor's going to knock him out, and that'll be a bummer because Poirier is pretty awesome. I think this fight will go longer than the first fight. I think McGregor will do better overall than in the first fight. I don't know what kind of adjustments he will have made to deal with the kicks.
You mean the second fight?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. The first fight this year. The second fight. Even in dealing with the low kicks, because the thing is, yeah, the specific like low calf kick is a bit of a newfangled thing, but McGregor is one of those guys that there's a certain kind of fighter that just doesn't check kicks much because they're used to being the guy that throws more kicks. So they're like, I never really needed to bother with it because, he threw one kick, I threw three, and then he stopped throwing kicks. He's been that guy a lot. Like I love how he kind of uses kicks as a rangefinder and to kind of herd people into, running into his punches, which is what he really wants to knock you out with, even though against Poirier in the first fight, he actually hit him with a head kick. He'll probably have Poirier in trouble. I'm going to feel super nervous about this one. But as the fight wears on, I trust Poirier to start building from strength to strength where McGregor will either hold steady or start to fade. Poirier will start rolling downhill on him. And McGregor's not going to have any quit in him. I think this goes to the fourth round. Poirier's going to have him tired, have him hurt. He's going to drop him. I don't know if he'll jump on him and choke him out to finish or just finish it with punches on the ground, but some sort of stoppage in the fourth round. I'm going to say submission. Dustin Poirier by fourth round submission. Okay, so now you and I have picked two different people to win this fight. I know that you generally do not like to make off-the-cuff predictions without doing a lot of tape study, which is why I'm going to ask you to do exactly that. If McGregor knocks out Dustin Poirier in the second round, he's going to cut an all-time promo. He's going to say a bunch of cocky shit. He's going to have tears in his eyes. I don't know if D is coming to Vegas. He might or might not have his family in the cage. He'll say some gracious things about Poirier. He'll say some shit-talking things about Poirier. And then he is going to look straight at the camera if Charles Oliveira is not there, or he's going to look straight at Charles Oliveira if he is there and say some cold-blooded shit, and he's going to have the next title shot. Who wins?
Well, I'll tell you this. It's so funny because I used to be considered a Conor McGregor hater. It's so funny. Like during his rise, I feel like I try to be very straight down the middle when it comes to fighters. And he had such a fan base that because I was straight down the middle, I was considered a Conor McGregor hater. But then now it's funny, like 5 years later, I'm considered like a Conor McGregor fanboy now. Like people are like, oh, like I have two friends like, oh, you love Conor. I'm like, really? No.
You haven't moved, just like
yeah, like no, everyone else does hate him now. It's like, no, he didn't suck. No, like when he was the two champion of two weight classes, no, he didn't suck. No, he wasn't overrated. He was incredible.
Yep.
Like, no, Eddie Alvarez wasn't a can, and no, Jose Aldo. Come on, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. But I don't know why I went on that for a second. But okay, I know why. I want old Conor back. I don't want him to be nice. I want him to be cocky. I want him to, like what you're saying. I don't want him to be humble. Like if he beats Poirier, like yeah, be humble to him. Say something nice. Like, hey, he's one of the great dudes in the sport. I respect him. His wife. Hey, I'll give you money to your charity. Whatever. But then start belittling the whole division. Like bring that back. I like the drama. Bring that back. And I want him to look past Charles Oliveira. I want him to call Khabib. Like I want him to, which actually I think is more likely. Like call the real champ. Say I want Khabib. And try to get that right now. And Khabib, I don't think Khabib's coming out of retirement no matter what. But I'm saying like, do that. Stop calling Usman. Talk about, oh yeah, I got this guy, beating everybody or whatever. Call out everybody. That's what I want him to do. Now, Charles Oliveira on one. He should be in attendance. If he's not in attendance, shame on the UFC, shame on him. Even if it's Poirier. Two, Charles Oliveira, you better be rooting for Conor to win, because that's your money. That's your money fight. Yep. Who do I now? I don't know who would win that matchup. Like, I will give Conor a punching chance against pretty much anybody. Anybody willing to stand with him? I think Charles Oliveira. I mean, he stood with Michael Chandler, almost got knocked out. Conor hits even harder than Michael Chandler. Well, they're probably equivalent, but he's a better striker than Michael Chandler. But that jiu-jitsu game of Charles Oliveira, if he can get it down, that's a bad night for Conor McGregor. But that's a big question if he could. Now, if he shoots, I think he could. But I don't know if he would. He might be stupid enough to stand with Conor. But he also can land. I mean, he's a fantastic striker himself, so I wouldn't be shocked if he hurt him and knocked him out himself. But gun to my head right now, and with the caveat that I can change it 3 months from now, 6 months from now, I give me Charles Oliveira. As far as Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier, I feel the same way. Give me Charles Oliveira, but I can change it 6 months from now.
That's interesting because if McGregor wins, I'm with you. I've got Oliveira. If Poirier wins, I've got Poirier.
Okay.
But again, like there will be, double-digit hours of film study before I, really like put my stamp on that, and then I'd still probably talk myself out of it like halfway through the preview. All right, man. Anything else on this fantastic card?
No, man. So one thing we talked about is, could this be the last of Conor McGregor? Could this be his last truly big fight that matters in the rankings? Yes or no? Just enjoy it then, regardless of it. Yes or no? Like really enjoy this moment. He probably still has a Diaz fight left in him if he loses, but let's just enjoy it. And Poirier, like what a great dude. Like talk about two guys coming from completely different avenues to this point in time. One guy, this historic rise like we've never seen, and then Dustin Poirier from Louisiana, the Bayou, coming in on the reality TV show, documentary show, fighting everybody through the WEC and the lower ranks from the prelims all the way to this point. That's a guy. If I'm wrong and he wins the trilogy, I'll be happy too.
Yep, same. I'm happy either way. That's it. That is the Sherdog Radio preview for UFC 264, Poirier versus McGregor 3. I have been your host, Ben Duffy. This has been Keith Schillen. There will be a recap immediately after the main event on Saturday or probably Sunday morning. Keith will not be joining me. There will be a co-host to be announced, but definitely drop by the Sherdog front page or just go directly to the Sherdog YouTube page. Watch the live stream. We will take your questions, comments, your takes on all the high-stakes fights that will be going on. Until then, thanks for listening. Enjoy your week and definitely enjoy the fights.